Are we live?
Yep, he's switching over.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. The time is now 6:01 p.m. And I'd like to welcome everybody to the meeting of the Galt City Council for January the 19th, 2021. Due to the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic emergency, we have to handle our city council meetings much differently than we usually do for the protection of our public and for our city staff. I'm going to ask our city manager, Lorenzo Hines, to give a brief explanation to the public. Mr. Hines?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening. This meeting of the Galt City Council is being conducted by teleconference/video conference in compliance with the state and county stay-at-home orders and as allowed by the governor's executive order N 29-20, which allows for the deviation of teleconference rules required by the Brown Act. Members of the public will see the council members and city staff who are appearing via remote video/telephone connections. City council meetings will be held virtually by teleconference or video conference only until further notice. Today's agenda states that rather than attending in person, residents may submit written public comments via email to pubcom@cityofgalt.org prior to the council meeting. Any written comments that were received will be read out loud during the council meeting by the city clerk on the appropriate agenda item, subject to the customary 5-minute time limit, unless the same individual also appears and requests to speak live during the meeting. We will also take the live comments first, and then the written comments will be read out loud. We are using the Zoom webinar format, which allows the public to provide live public comment. Members of the public may use the link to enter the webinar as attendees. They should be able to use the raise their hand feature in the Zoom webinar to let us know if they would like to speak, and should do so when the mayor announces the time for general public comment or when a specific agenda item is called if your comment concerns an agenda item. We request, as we do at typical in-person council meetings, that speakers provide their name and address when they are called on to speak. And their line will be unmuted, and by doing so, but doing so is not required. Attendees should also see the lower hand feature if they change their minds and do not want to speak. And Mayor, that concludes my comments on that area.
Thank you, Mr. Hines. I'd like to now call the meeting to order. Ms. Hubert, if you would please take a roll call.
Vice Mayor Sandu.
Here.
Councilmember Papineau.
Here.
Councilmember Vandenberg.
Here.
Councilmember Lozano.
Here.
Mayor Farmer.
Here. Thank you. If you would all now join us in a silent prayer followed by a flag salute.
Mr. Mayor, can I just make a quick comment before we do that?
Yes, please.
I'm sorry. I would just like to ask that we have the silent prayer tonight in honor of Sacramento County Sheriff's Deputy Adam Gibson, who was violently murdered last night, protecting our community, along with his canine partner, Riley.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Lozano. Please join us now in prayer. Thank you, everyone. If you would now join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Salute, pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Ms. Hubert, can you please read our replay statement?
This meeting of the Galt City Council will be cablecast on Metro Cable 14, the local government affairs channel, on the Comcast Consolidated Communications and AT&T Uverse cable systems. The meeting is closed captioned and webcast at www.sacmetrocable.tv. Today's meeting will air Friday, January 22nd at 9 a.m. and Saturday, January 23rd at 9 a.m. A DVD copy is available for checkout from the Sacramento Central Library.
Thank you, Tina. Moving on to our first agenda item B, agenda approvals, additions, and/or deletions. Do we have any items from the council?
Mr. Mayor, if there are no items from the council, I would ask that I have the ability to move a portion of my comments by staff up to the agenda item C, and because I have an important information for the community.
Sure, no problem. So if we have no further comments from the council, I will move to the next item. Item C, presentations. Ms. Hubert, do we have any presentations other than what Mr. Hines mentioned?
No, we do not.
Okay, Mr. Hines, if you please.
Thank you. We were informed last week that the Department of State Hospitals has petitioned the Humboldt County Superior Court to place a sexually violent predator in the area of Harvey Road in the unincorporated Sacramento County, California. It is, again, as I mentioned, it's unincorporated Sacramento County. It's also on the outskirts of Galt. And so we are working with our partners to submit letters of opposition to the court. And we are also scheduling a special council meeting on Friday to discuss this matter further. And that way I can inform council as to our progress in getting support, opposition support for this particular item. And I am going to turn it over to Chief Kalinowski, who will give you a bit more detail.
Thank you, Mr. Hines, and good evening, Mayor, members of council, and the public. As Mr. Hines indicated, and many of you know, we were informed actually late on January 8th from the District Attorney's Office about a potential placement of a sexually violent predator in the unincorporated area of Galt. In subsequent conversations and engagement with the Sacramento County Sheriff's Office and the Sacramento County District Attorney's Office, we are partnering with them to get the word out about this placement and solicit letters of opposition from community members about their concerns about this placement. We posted on our Facebook, as did the city, information related to how members of the public can submit letters of opposition to the court in Humboldt County for their consideration. A couple things that are important about this. First of all, the deadline for written submissions to the District Attorney's Office is Monday, January 25th, as the court date is on Friday, January 29th. On our Facebook, and ultimately will be available on the city's webpage, there is a link to the Humboldt County courts available to the public and other concerned citizens for the court hearing that will occur on the 29th. It's important that the community know that written comment should include factual information and shall not include threatening, intimidating, or harassing language. Furthermore, comments that contain language that could be construed as demeaning or inappropriate to the court will not be submitted by the District Attorney's Office. We ask that those letters be submitted via email if possible. The email address is svpcooley, COOLEY, @sacda.org. Further, if folks wish to submit written comments in hard copy, they could be directed to the District Attorney's Office. Attention, SVP, Sexual Violent Predator, that's what that stands for, Cooley, who's the subject's last name, at 901 G Street in Sacramento, California, 95814. Again, the community will hear more information, as Mr. Hines said, on Friday, and the city council will be taking this matter up. And that's all I have at this point, unless there are any further questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Kalinowski. Do we have any comments from any of the council members on this presentation?
The link you mentioned on the Facebook page, is that the same one that is the GoFundMe, not the GoFundMe, but change.org petition?
That petition we are not involved in. That's appears to be a private engagement. I was told by, I will add this, the district attorney's office encourages separate, distinct, and unique written submissions to the court. They feel that provides more leverage and information to the court than simply signing a petition, although I would never discourage folks from participating in their civic rights to do so. So I don't have any more information about the change.org. The one I was referencing was the humboldtcourts.ca.gov, and there's a code behind it for the actual court link that will get you to the Zoom meeting that's going to occur at 8:30 in the morning on January 29th.
Okay, great. I'll make sure to look that up and share it with the public.
Thank
Absolutely. Thank you.
Mr. Lozano, Councilmember Lozano, you had a comment?
Yeah, I just want to thank City Manager Hines and Chief Kalinowski for bringing this up at the presentation part right at the beginning of the meeting. This is an important issue, and I look forward to participating in the meeting on Friday.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Lozano. Anyone else from the council have anything to add at this moment?
Mr. Mayor, I have a comment. Since we get that information, I know you all, my colleague, they get a lot of letters. Same thing, I get a lot of letters concerning the matter. 16 have a concern, same thing, my concern. And we can work as a team, what the best we can do of our children. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor. I'm sure all of us concur with the efforts that our city manager and our chief and our city attorney are doing. And thank you again for stepping up and bringing this up early in the meeting for those that are out there that are been emailing all of us and everything. I know we've all gotten a lot of emails. So any other comments before I move on? No? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Hines, and thank you, Mr. Kalinowski again. So now we'll move on to our item D, which is our public comment. Ms. Hubert, can you please read a statement regarding the public comment?
Under Government Code Section 54954.3, members of the public may address the City Council on non-agenda items. The public comment section is for the City Council to receive comments, except for brief responses to questions. No discussion or action may be taken on any item that is not listed on the agenda. Please limit comments to a maximum of 5 minutes. Due to the statewide emergency and social distancing guidelines, public comments may be submitted via email to pubcom@cityofgalt.org and will be read out loud subject to the customary 5-minute time limitation. Also, members of the public may participate electronically via https://web.zoom.us/872-698-15481, webinar ID 872-6981-5481.
Thank you, Tina. Do we have any written public comments?
No written public comments.
Ms. Rodiker, do we have any hands raised online?
We have no hands raised online.
Thank you. All right, well, if we have no public comment, we can move on to our next agenda item, reports by City Council on regional boards, commissions, and/or committees. We'll start with our Vice Mayor, Mr. Sandhu.
Mr. Mayor, nothing to report tonight from the regional committees.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Councilmember Papineau.
Nothing particular to report. The first meeting of the Air Quality Board will be on the 29th.
Thank you, Mr. Papanow. Councilmember Vandenberg.
Joined the youth commission meeting. It was encouraging. Other than that, there's nothing in particular to report.
Thank you, Mr. Vandenberg. Councilmember Lozano.
Yeah, have a SACOG board meeting this Thursday, but I do have the last SACOG board meeting to report on since we canceled our last meeting. Nothing huge to report there. We did wish the outgoing members goodbye, and our chair for this next year is Bonnie Gore, who is a county supervisor in Placer County. And the vice chair is council member Rick Jennings from the city of Sacramento. And so more to come on our next meeting. We will start the year off Thursday. So that's it.
Thank you, Councilmember. I myself attended the Youth Commission meeting along with Councilmember Vandenberg on January 4th. It was my first one in a long time. It was very good. You know, a lot of young, talented young leaders as part of that commission, and I look forward to being involved with those. On the 14th of the month, I attended a large Zoom meeting along with our interim chief Kalinowski for the Sacramento Criminal Justice Cabinet, which was attended by other police chiefs and district attorney, I believe, some other mayors, council members from other cities. It was very well informed. It was very informative. We talked about the effects of COVID on the jail populations and the impact that's having there. And we talked about some crime legislation and things. So it was very interesting, and I was thankful that I was able to attend that and check that out. And lastly, on the 15th of this month, attended the Kevin Tom Memorial, which I know the other council members that were able to attended, and it's been 8 years, and so it's time flies. It was a very nice ceremony, and I was thankful for everybody that attended, and also the other agency that attended as well. So that concludes my comments for that. So we'll move on to item F, information consent calendar. It is recommended that the items 1 through 4 be acted simultaneously unless a separate discussion and/or action is requested by a council member. Our items are item 1, accept the minutes of the December 15th, 2020 meeting. Number 2, receive and file warrants for the period ending January the 6th, 2021. Number 3, accept the treasurer's report as submitted. Item 4, adopt a resolution approving non-material changes in the City of Galt's groundwater sustainability agency boundary due to recent city annexations, and authorize the Director of Public Works to submit the necessary documentation to the California Department of Water Resources. And number 2, authorize the city manager to assign the respective memorandums and understanding between the City of Galt and the Galt Irrigation District and the City of Galt Slough House Resource Conservation District. Do I have a motion to approve the consent calendar?
Make a motion to approve consent calendar items 1 through 4.
Moved by Councilmember Lozano. Do I have a second?
I will do the second.
Seconded by Vice Mayor Sandu. Tina, if you could have a roll call vote, please.
Vice Mayor Sandu,
Yeah.
Councilmember Papineau,
Aye.
Councilmember Vandenberg,
Aye.
Councilmember Lozano,
Aye.
Mayor Farmer.
Aye. Item passes 5-0. Moving on to item G, scheduled matters, notice of public hearing. Tina, do we have any for this item?
We do not.
Okay, thank you. Moving right along, item H, regular calendar, city manager's office. Item number 1, coronavirus COVID-19 update. Mr. Hines.
Thank you, Mayor. Lorenzo Hines, City Manager. Just wanted to let our citizens know that are here in Galt or in Sacramento proper, the cases for COVID-19 have gone up 13% since our January 4th meeting. The number of deaths in Sacramento County have gone up 20%. Here in Galt, and I wanted to clarify, when we speak to Galt and these numbers, we are speaking to the zip code that Galt sits in. The actual Galt city limits is but a small portion of the actual area that's being measured here when Sacramento County reports Galt. So I want everybody to realize that. So the stats that I'm reading aren't so much driven by all the activity that's within the city limits. It's driven by the whole area. Now, granted, the city limits contain the most populous of that area, so you can deduce from there. But the number of cases that have appeared in Galt since our January 4th meeting, they've gone up 6%. And so we've gotten another 128 cases since that time. The number of deaths since our meeting has increased by 3 during that time. So the pandemic continues to rage on, but we're doing our best to make sure our folks are safe and are following all the protocols. On January 13th, the state of California announced that the greater Sacramento region was permitted to exit the state's regional stay-at-home order with our 4-week ICU availability projection at that point in time was 19%. Counties in the greater Sacramento region can now resume operating under Tier 1/Purple, which allows for outdoor dining to resume, along with the reopening of salons, barbershops, personal care services, along with other uses described in the blueprint, Blueprint for a Safer Economy, Purple Tier. It's on the governor's website. It's anticipated that Greater Sacramento region will be allowed to operate in the Purple Tier for at least 4 weeks before the ICU capacity projections are reevaluated. The focus now, however, has turned to the distribution of the vaccines in California. Sacramento County issued a media release last week, which explained that Sacramento County Public Health is currently vaccinating identified worker groups, primarily frontline healthcare and first responders, in the first phase 1A tiers 1 through 3, with limited vaccine allocations coming from the state. Sacramento County, and there are limited vaccine allocations coming from the state. Sacramento County Public Health has allocated 10,500 doses of Moderna and 5,850 doses of the Pfizer vaccine. So far, all but 1,235 of those doses have been administered by medical staff. And they've been administered to doctors, nurses, healthcare staff, correctional health staff, firefighters, EMTs, paramedics, long-term care facilities, or other providers in that tier. Due to the limited availability of the vaccine, Sacramento County will not be able to accommodate all requests for vaccinations between the continued need in phase 1A frontline workers, as well as the addition of those who are 65 and older. While demand far exceeds allocation, the county is hopeful that allocations will drastically increase in the near future, and we can begin to include those residents 65 and older who are approved for vaccinations, as well as other phase 1B groups. At this time, we request that residents who are 65 and older to wait to receive more information from their provider or public health so that when allocations increase, they are aware of the next steps. And Mayor, thank you. That concludes my comments.
Mr. Mayor,
Sorry, it's on mute. Thank you, Mr. Hines. Do we have any comments from the council on this subject?
Mr. Mayor, I have a couple comment. Mr. Hines, you said when we get the data, it's 95632 is a whole area, including some of the Sacramento County and San Joaquin County, I believe, right? there is no way we can separate, because when we sending the message out there, you see the media, they said, oh, Galt is a very hot spot. And
Right.
it's come back on us.
Exactly.
So I don't know, there is any way we isolate Galt instead of there, so we can tell the citizen that's the rate we have, and that's the percentage we increasing or decreasing.
Mhm. Well, we've reached out to the county and asked that particular question, but the county is currently tracking all of their COVID activity geographically using zip codes. So the county has a dashboard on their website, the COVID dashboard, that basically shows you the cases and the activity for all of the areas in Sacramento County. They're all measured by zip codes. And so we have asked that question. We felt that it was, it could have been clearer that when we say Galt, we're not necessarily meaning the city limits, we're meaning the entire zip code. And we actually issued a press release last week explaining to the public about the geographical anomaly. And so they had some sense of the fact that when we read these numbers, that the Galt city limits is just part of the equation. There was a report in the media a little while ago that our per capita case rate was the highest in the county. Well, that all had to do with the fact that we had a fair number of cases and we have a small population. And so that number, yeah, it looks high, but that's just the way the numbers work out. But I can assure you, Vice Mayor Sandhu, that we have reached out to the county, but at this point, I don't believe they have an interest in changing their methodology.
Thank you for the explanation.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Hines. Any other council members have any comments on this item? Councilmember Lozano, please.
Yeah, I'll be brief. Mr. Hines, I appreciate we received your email today regards to the letters that were sent related to businesses in our community and support of those businesses. You've sent it off to the county supervisors as well as Governor Newsom. That was a result of our last meeting. I wanted to just publicly thank you for getting that to them and pushing forward to support our business community.
Very good. Thank you, sir. And I would like to make a correction, Mr. Mayor, if I can. I believe I referred to January 4th as our last meeting, and our last meeting was actually December 15th. We just measured the statistics that I gave you from January 4th.
Thanks for clarifying that.
Sure.
And thank you for your comments, Councilmember Lozano. I as well am very grateful for the council coming together on that and getting that letter out on behalf of our businesses. Do we have any public comment on this subject, Tina?
No written comment.
Thank you. Do we have any hands raised online, Rose?
We have no hands raised.
Thank you. Well, if we have no further comments by council, I'd like to move on to our next item. Item 2, the City Council 2021 priority items. Receive presentation from Mr. Hines. Mr. Hines, please.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can everyone see the PowerPoint presentation? Okay, great. So what I wanted to do here was give the public a sense of some of the priority items that are going to come before council in the next 6 to 12 months. This is not an exhaustive list. There are still a couple of things that staff is still working on, but by and large, this is the majority of the big items that we are going to be dealing with this particular year. So the first item that we'll be addressing is the issue with the city's general fund, and that the city's general fund is experiencing a structural deficit, mainly due to the loss of revenues with the Galt market, the fact that our lighting and landscape districts aren't supporting those expenses, their related expenses, and basically those deficits are being addressed with general fund dollars. Right now, our general fund is projected to lose about 1.3 to 1.5 million dollars annually. The general fund is experiencing this deficit because sales and property taxes currently in place are not keeping pace with the deficit and the declining market revenues. So some of the solutions that we're looking at is that, first of all, we issued the 2021 and 21-22 budget with temporary cuts and various expenditure service cuts. That budget was balanced. And in June 2019, the Finance Department presented a long-range financial plan that showed where we were headed financially. Long-term solutions, we will continue at looking at cost containment and reductions. We will also be looking at ways to enhance and develop our long-term revenue, be that revamping the Galt market area, which we will be presenting to council at our next meeting, submitting revenue enhancing voter measures to Galt citizens, and also going out and seeking other revenue enhancing industries that we can attract to the Galt area. This is an interesting time economically, and there may be businesses looking to relocate to an area that is more suitable for them cost and workforce wise. So we'll be looking for those opportunities. We anticipate that the mid-biennial budget discussion and the revised long-term financial plan will take place in the spring of this year. And right now we're projecting that conversation to happen between April and June of 2021. The next issue that we'll be dealing with is the grant that we received from the State Energy Commission, the Small Government Leadership Challenge Grant. In April 2017, we were selected to receive this grant. And in order to satisfy the requirements of the grant, a final action just needs to be completed by the council. The activities that we bring before the council does not need to be committed to. We just need an action from the council. The grant provided $650,000 for 3 activities: Climate Action Plan, the Transportation Corridor Master Plan, the Carilion Boulevard Plan, which we'll be talking about tonight, and the Master Plan for the Galt Market and Fairgrounds, which we'll be talking about at our next meeting. And so the Climate Action Plan, it's a comprehensive roadmap that outlines the specific activities that the city will undertake to reduce greenhouse gases. It generally focuses on activities that can achieve best emission reductions in the most cost-effective manner. And this plan was actually approved by City Council March 3rd, 2020. The second part of this plan, again, we'll be discussing this tonight, is the master plan for Carilion Boulevard that encompasses a transportation policy and design approach that allows for safe travel by those walking, cycling, driving, automobiles, and riding public transportation. We anticipate bringing this item to council. It's on tonight, so we're actually slightly ahead of schedule. But we're going to have a work session tonight, and we'll continue the conversation through February and March. The Galt Master Plan will be coming before council at our next council meeting, and basically we'll be presenting a visioning document for the Galt market area, which we believe addresses some of the concerns that were raised by council and raised by the public the last time this issue was presented. And I'm looking forward to having that discussion at the next meeting. But this is the third leg of the grant. And again, with this grant, again, the grant allows us to explore these areas, put forth environmental documents. So when we finally make a decision as to the final direction, those environmental documents are already in play, and these projects will be shovel ready. And so again, we'll be presenting the Galt market plan at the next meeting. The next issue that we'll be dealing with is the Walker Park Master Plan update. And the original Walker Park Community Master Plan was completed in 2004. In 2011, the city completed phase 1. which included 3 sports fields, playing park area, restrooms, storage, and various other things. The remaining unconstructed amenities from the 2004 master plans includes 2 youth baseball, softball fields, additional parking, completed roadway, splash park, tennis court, basketball, and again, various other amenities. In June of 2019, the city received 1.7 million from the State Parks and Recreation Department to be used specifically for the next phase of the Walker Community Park. Park usage and facility needs have changed significantly since the master plan was developed in 2004. Updates to the original master plan were needed to address current trends and including the need for additional parking and restrooms. So this year, the city awarded a contract, or I'm sorry, last year, the city awarded a contract to review the existing master plan and conduct public meetings, make recommendations to update the existing master plan. And so we anticipate getting the results of this effort in front of council between February and March of this year. The other issue, another issue that we're anticipating bringing before council is staff will provide a briefing on the success of bringing the landscaping services in-house to address our parks, trails, and transit corridors. Staff will brief council on the options research to address landscaping services, in addition to an update on how those services are currently being performed and how efficient they are. We anticipate that will occur during February, March of this year. Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. And so I'm going to call it the SGMA, was passed by the state legislature in 2015. And the act requires all groundwater basins within California to develop a groundwater sustainability plan. The city of Galt is one of 7 agencies responsible for developing and implementing a groundwater sustainability plan for the Consumnes Subbasin, which is the sole source of water for the city's water supply. The groundwater sustainability plan must be adopted and submitted by the state by June 2022. And so the key council considerations will include approval of a joint powers agreement that we anticipate getting in front of you by May of 2021, and the funding mechanism for ongoing monitoring and administration and compliance projects. And so we anticipate that the overall presentation, which occurred back in December, and so that's why it has a check next to it. And then we have the approval of the JPA, which is we anticipate in spring 2021. We think it's going to be around May. And then funding for compliance projects, we anticipate we'll be bringing before council in July of 2021. The next item is SB 1383. The organics diversion and recycling. And so Senate Bill 1383 passed in 2016 and required organics diversion and recycling by 2021. And subsequent state enforcement will begin in January 2022. And so we'll be seeing a presentation on this particular item tonight. I'll move to the second bullet. The city has effectively purchased a compliant program through the 2018 franchise agreement with Cal Waste. However, the city will need to update its solid waste ordinance to reflect the SB 1383 requirements and work with Cal Waste to achieve those goals. And you'll hear more details about this, this item tonight. Walnut Interchange. And so the city recently selected a consultant to begin the preliminary engineering and initial environmental work necessary for consideration of a future interchange at State Route 99 and Walnut Avenue. This effort is essentially focused on determining the feasibility of an interchange at this location and developing potential alternatives. Once completed, if determined feasible, staff will seek funding to move forward with the next phase of the project, which will be to refine alternatives and conduct full environmental analysis. The next subsequent phase would be to actually complete the final design, then actual construction. And so we're looking at a schedule that would be approximately 5 to 10 years out. So it's a big project, but we believe it's necessary. So we're Going to be working on this for the most part all year, and we would anticipate having this in front of council during late fall of 2021. C Street improvements. The city received a $2.5 million grant from SACOG, the Sacramento Area Council of Governments, for construction of alternative mode improvements along C Street between Civic Drive and 5th Street. Public Works is currently soliciting for consultants to assist the city with the design and environmental compliance for this project. We expect to bring the project to council by early 2021. The contract will also include a public outreach component. This effort is anticipated to take about 15 months, and then the project will bid for construction in late 2022. We will bring the item before council during, right now the anticipated schedule is March. City Water Service. The city has retained a consultant to perform our cost of services analysis and associated rate study. This was last performed in 2015, and the analysis will determine whether there's a need to consider a water service rate increase or if the rates are appropriate as they are. Should the need for a rate increase be indicated, there will be a rate workshop with the council as part of the rate study effort. Additionally, the scope of services for this item with the consultant includes a rate report, public hearing attendance, and Prop 218 support. The analysis effort is currently in progress and anticipated to be completed during summer of 2021. And so we'll be bringing a status update on this project sometime between February and summer of 2021. The housing element, which we had our initial introduction to back in December. The purpose of the housing element is to identify and analyze existing and projected housing needs in an effort to preserve, improve, and develop housing for all economic segments of the community. In the upcoming year, the City of Galt will be updating its housing element pursuant to state law. The city adopted its existing 2013 through 2021 housing element back in 2014. The next cycle housing element will be due to the California Housing and Community Development Department in mid to late 2021. And so we've already accomplished our December objective. And so we will be bringing this item back to council between February and July of this year. Catarina Estates, this proposed project would include the development of 61 single-family units and associated improvements on a 12.4 acre property. The project site is located on the southwest corner of Joy Drive and H Street. Project is proposed will require a general plan amendment. The parcel is considered an infill lot and is in the proximity of Old Town Galt, surrounding by existing residential zoned subdivisions. The City Council will receive a presentation on this item sometime between February and March 2021. So the Galt Police Department, their station has been the subject of some of our facility sort of desires, as well as that we have a number of facilities within the city of Galt that need a little TLC. These structures have been up for a while and they're starting to show wear and tear. One of the structures that is sort of top of the list of structures that need to be addressed is the Galt Police Department station, or the Galt Police Department facility. Public Works has been reviewing the facility needs for maintenance and upgrades for the Galt Police Department facility. We expect this review to be completed by early 2021. We estimate that the needs will total a minimum of $520,000. We have a short list of the items that we know need to be addressed. And so we'll be bringing that item to council sometime in either the late winter or early spring. But just know that we're looking at these issues. And so that concludes a run through of some of the bigger priorities that council will be addressing again over the next few months. This list of priorities will shift based on goal setting, we do anticipate having goal setting at one point during the early winter. And so I would anticipate that more projects will be added to this list, or some of the projects on this list may morph. But I wanted the opportunity, and Mayor, thank you, to not only address the new council, but also let the public know the issues that we're dealing with in case anyone has any input out there. And Mayor, that concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Hines. Do any of the council members, there's a lot of topics covered here, and I know we want to dive into any specific because we will be obviously going over all this, but does anybody have any general questions they would like to bring up regarding any of these items?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, Vice Mayor, go ahead.
I don't have any question on this agenda item. This is basically what I like to mention. Mr. Hines make a very good process. He telling us a guidelines. So we see what's coming in a whole year, 2021. It's not just us, to the public. So we be prepared when this agenda coming in. And this is the first time last I was on the council. The city manager telling us what is coming for next month, what is coming for next month. I think for Mr. Hind and his staff for bringing this report. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Agreed. Any other council members like to comment on these matters? Mr. Lozano.
Yeah, just real briefly. I was talking to the city manager in preparation for the meeting, and one of my concerns, at least coming forward in the next few meetings, at least through the next 6 months, is we have a lot of topics to cover, and many of them are going to require an enormous amount of public input and council input and council studying. And I just made some hash marks as we were going here, Mr. Hines, because I know when we were chatting, I didn't have exact numbers, but it looks like 9 of these items are going to be coming to us between February and March. And I know that part of our conversation in preparation for the meeting was, ensuring that we had plenty of time to do it, not rush through these items as well. So I appreciate the aggressive schedule. But I am well prepared to take them as we can and get them heard and move forward to resolution as soon as practical. One of the other things that kind of just sparked a question in my mind, and not looking for an answer at all, Mr. Hines, but I noticed that our Park and Recreation Master Plan was last done in 2010. Have we thought about, and I don't want to put another thing on anyone's plate, but many of these items are items that would be covered in the Parks and Rec Master Plan. Have we thought about redoing our master plan and using that as the vehicle to address some of these issues? I don't know what the timing of that is, but just kind of a thought. I went through a Park and Rec facility master plan at my former agency I was at, and I mean we actually took about 18 months to do it, but there was a lot of community interviews and tons of stakeholder interviews. In my opinion, maybe a little too many, but I don't know if that's a possibility, and so I'm thinking that maybe we take a look at that, and if the answer is it's going to take too long, then we will have to move forward. But I thought that this might be a good vehicle to use to get some of these issues resolved. And that's all I had.
Okay.
Thank you. Appreciate the foresight, and I have in the past worked with chief executives that have mapped it out, and this is very well done.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Mayor, if it's okay, I'd like to respond to one of the items.
Yes, please do so. Go ahead.
So one of the things, and I realize we do have some items that are concentrated in February and March. Um, but the way we like to present these items is, for instance, the Galt Market Master Plan. At our next meeting, you're going to see a visioning document that lays out sort of the best, what we believe is the best alternatives developed by staff and by our consultant. And it is being held in a work session format. So we're asking for no decision. From that point, we basically are going to have a roadshow, and we're going to go talk to all of our partners here in the city of Galt and get their input, and come back in March with a final item or a final plan for council consideration. So I'm going to do my best, and actually I'll do better than my best, to make sure that if there are any complex items that require some pretty heavy decision making, that we always precede that with a work session where we can introduce the item to you. And if that means pushing them out a few months, that's okay. What's imperative to me is that you all be introduced to the item and the public has a chance to see the item and see the conversation, and before we actually have to come back and deliberate and take a vote. And so this schedule is not inflexible. So, we'll push it out, and we'll make sure that, that we get these items to you all in due time.
Thank you, Mr. Hines.
Sure.
And I wanted to comment to some of the things that Councilmember Lozano said. Those are well said, and I agree that these are all things we want to accomplish, but I don't want to blow through them. I don't want you to take the wrong impression from the council, Mr. Hines, that you are somehow lagging behind on something. I want to make sure that a lot of these require community input, and where I am a little concerned is how do we facilitate that in the middle of what we're going through right now, where we can't just have regular town hall type meetings. We have to do Zooms, and we have people that maybe are not capable of doing Zoom, technically challenged people. So how do we facilitate the extensive and thorough community input that a lot of these items are going to need? Because as Councilmember Lozano said, I believe he said as well, that that's like the most critical piece of a lot of these projects. So I'm looking forward to that, and ideas that you guys are coming up with, you and staff, on how to get that input and make sure we thoroughly do that, and not just say, oh, we reached out, check a box and move on. We really genuinely got to get that input.
Right. And when you see the Galt market plan for at the next meeting, there will be a slide or two that will lay out all the organizations that we plan on meeting with, and we'll explain to you how we plan to meet with them as well. And so this is, if there was ever a time for ingenuity, this is it. And so we endeavor to do that.
I also want to make sure that we do, not just meeting with organizations, but a lot of just that we have a mechanism for meeting with the general public, that creating an easy way for them, and if it has to be through an online public comment type. But I do commend you and other staff with coming up with the new concept of having these study sessions with the council on items that are could be very controversial, ahead of just bringing them to us, because it makes a huge difference, as we may see tonight with our next item. But so thank you. A lot of stuff there. I do have lots of questions, but I'm going to wait till we actually dive into those in those upcoming meetings. So does any other council, Councilor Papineau or Vandenberg, do you have any comments on this before we move on?
You guys covered it quite well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. If we have no further comments from any of the council, then we will move on to our next item, which is from our Community Development Department. Actually, I'm sorry. Do we have any public comment on this item, Tina?
No written comment.
And Rose, do we have any hands raised online?
We have no hands raised.
Thank you. Okay. Now moving on to Community Development Department. Item 3 of our regular calendar, which is the Carillion Boulevard Corridor Plan Study Session and discussion being presented to us by our Mr. Craig Hoffman. Craig?
All right. Mr. Mayor, members of the council, tonight we are going to be having a study session on the Carillion Boulevard Corridor Plan. And for council members and those members of the public that are watching, tonight what we're looking for is we're looking to have a discussion and we're looking for direction, but we're not looking for a decision. We want to talk about this plan and be able to share a little bit of some ideas and how this roadway should look. And so I think you're going to see a much different presentation than what you saw in August. Next slide, please. So for this study session, what we're looking for is to provide a presentation, and I know that the council has reviewed the staff report, but we're looking to get your comments and your questions, what those might be, and then open it up to the public and get the comments from the public and the community, what they think about what they're seeing tonight. Coming back to the council, looking for any final comments or direction that you might have, providing direction to staff for this planning effort, and then ultimately directing staff to come back at a later date for some type of public hearing and a decision. Next slide, please. So the Carillion Boulevard Corridor Plan is a planning level document which identifies improvements that could be made when traffic demands warrant. And this effort was funded by the California Energy Commission, and it was designed to fund planning efforts advancing greenhouse gas reductions to meet state climate targets and goals. And some of the comments we heard through this process were, you know, what's being proposed is a little extreme, but you have to understand where this is coming from. It's coming from a grant that was meant to identify greenhouse gas reduction. And that's what one of the alternatives did. And so we've had comments that, you know, this doesn't look like Galt. And that's fine, but it was an alternative, and we'll review that. But I just want to make sure that everyone understands your alternatives came from just the nature of what the grant was. And then these improvements would not take necessarily place now, but well in the future, and definitely not all at once. Next slide, please. Funding for these improvements that are currently not programmed or identified, again, just a planning level document at this point in time. And these are some important items. In order to satisfy the requirements of the grant, a final action must be completed by the City Council. The current plan must be accepted. Doesn't necessarily have to be approved, but the planning effort has to be accepted. And the proposed two design alternatives that you've seen so far, they don't need to be approved as well, but the effort has to be accepted. And most importantly, the city does not have to move forward on the planning project, but again, a final action on the planning effort is needed to satisfy the grant requirements. Next slide, please. So the City Council held a public hearing back in August of 2020. And during the presentation, what we heard were comments about improving safety, encouraging bicycle and pedestrian mobility choices, looking at adequate capacity to serve the existing and future vehicular demand. And you saw two alternatives. And the comments were, these alternatives are extreme. They're really at two ends of the spectrum. And so the council directed staff, take another look at this project, go back to the Planning Commission, and let's see about developing another alternative that could be brought back forward to the City Council. Next slide, please. So we went back to the Planning Commission in November, And by a 4-0 vote, the Planning Commission made the following recommendation. And the first is that the City Council certify the environmental document prepared for the planning effort. And why this is so important is that by certifying the environmental document for the project, that if there were future traffic improvements that needed to be made on Carillion Boulevard, that those improvements would already now have an environmental document. And what we're really seeing is groups like SACOG, the Sacramento Area Council of Government, they're looking for projects that are shovel ready. And shovel ready means having an environmental document prepared. That environmental document has looked at Carillion and it's analyzed what would it look like having all traffic signals or all roundabouts. So if there was a project that involved some type of improvement to an intersection, it'd already be done. So this is definitely a benefit for this community. The second recommendation was that the Carillion Boulevard Corridor Plan and planning effort accept it, that it's complete. That's needed to satisfy the grant. Doesn't mean the improvements have to be made, but it means that we undertook an effort and it was complete. We came to a final decision. The Planning Commission didn't recommend approval of alternative 1 or 2 that you previously saw, and they did not recommend generating a new alternative that would not satisfy the intent of the grant. And by that, I mean reducing, the carbon footprint, reducing greenhouse gases. The idea was, well, if we're not going to generate an alternative that meets the needs of the grant, then we probably shouldn't generate that alternative. And so that recommendation was forwarded to you. And again, the certification of the environmental document, accepting the master plan, not approving alternative 1 and 2 are really sound direction. And it's the cornerstone for the 3 options that you have before you tonight. Next slide, please. So additionally, staff took the Planning Commission recommendation, started listening to what the council had in mind, and we've generated 2 other options. The second option is really taking a look at the existing roadway and proposes to restripe the roadway to increase bicycle lane width and potential other roadway modifications and intersection improvements when needed. What staff heard was Carillion Boulevard should maintain a 4-lane road. Do not remove the landscape center median. Do not remove or reduce the landscape corridors. All intersections along Carillion Boulevard should be reviewed for safety and operational improvements as traffic conditions warrant. Wider bike lanes would be nice. New development should build roadways and intersections that are appropriate in scale. Roundabouts at every intersection are too much. Traffic signals at intersections are too much. And work to ensure a vehicle movement that is efficient. But I think the direction really was to come back with some alternatives that were realistic in the context of the existing roadway. So then option 3 really leaves the roadway as it currently stands, but looks at design improvements to intersections as they are warranted and leave the design again of Carillion alone. So for option 3, what you're really looking for is, review the existing intersection and work to enhance intersections to improve pedestrian and bicycle safety. And this could include flashing pedestrian crossing signs or design features that separate pedestrians from cars, some type of crosswalk separator. It could include roundabouts. It could include stop signs or signalized intersections. But really, What this option is saying is that look at the individual intersections and design them in context of how they fit into Carilion. And those different intersections may have different needs, different demands. They may function slightly differently. And you'd look at them at the time and place that it needed to. So next slide, please. As we get into a little bit more detail of the options, and I think I kind of jumped the gun here.
Okay, so Craig, I'm gonna jump in if it's okay with
Sure,
you.
sure.
I just want to sort of do a summation of what Craig just presented to you, to the city council. Now, essentially, Craig's going to present three options to you. Option one, this was the option that was approved by the Planning Commission. By the way, all of these options include the approval of the existing planning study and the environmental document. So that's all, those two steps are already built into these options. Now, option one is basically the rejection of alternatives 1 and 2. Again, those were the alternatives that had the excessive roundabouts and excessive lighting, and clearly it didn't sit well with the council at that point in time, and it didn't sit well with the Planning Commission. Option 2 is basically we're making some tweaks to the roadway to make it a little more functional and a little more greenhouse gas friendly. Option 3, which gives you the most flexibility, is basically taking the impact of those developments that are currently going up along Carilion and waiting to see, once those houses are built, what kind of impact that traffic is having on those particular intersections, and then designing a solution at that point. And so Craig's going to take you through all three of those options, and this will be a great discussion, but I definitely agree with council's reaction to the roundabouts and the lighting. This was prior to my tenure as city manager, but I did see that meeting, and so I definitely agree with you all. So Craig, go ahead and take it away and take them through the three options, please.
Sure. Next slide, please. So again, going back to option one is, and this was an option that I don't think was really fully vetted in August when this was before the council. You know, you really had this idea that, hey, you have the planning document, you either have this alternative 1 discussion or alternative 2, but I think you really did have another option at that meeting. And that was basically just to take and certify the environmental document, accept the report without approving either of the 2 alternatives. And this idea that, again, this was a planning level document and the city was not required to make improvements as part of the grant or the planning efforts. Can we go to the next slide, please? And so here is the alternative 1 that you previously saw, going all the way from Twin Cities all the way down to Basso. And you take a look at it and, you know, it's a road diet, it's all these roundabouts. And again, this satisfies the needs of a grant from the Energy Commission. But I think there were questions whether it satisfies the needs of the community or the vision of the community and how people saw Carilion functioning. And so you saw this alternative, and again, this alternative too extreme to one side. Next slide, please. And then you saw this other alternative, which was basically this idea that, hey, from Twin Cities Road all the way down to Basso, you're going to see all these traffic signals. Well, I think that's a little extreme on the other side, because what we saw as part of the traffic studies was that there weren't any warrants that would necessitate these improvements at this time or even into the future. It was an extreme alternative that I think there's something in between this alternative 1 idea and this alternative 2 idea. Next slide, please. So option 2 was this idea of coming up with an alternative 3 for the council to take a look at. And we'd still be looking at Carillion Boulevard being 4 lanes, but really it's taking a look at what's there. We have the landscaping, we have the median, we have the 4 lanes. Well, is there something we can do to maybe enhance a bicycle experience? They're wide lanes that currently exist, and as financing became available or funding in the future, we could take a look at restriping the roadway, taking 1 or 1.5 feet in width from the lanes and putting them into a wider bike lane. No modifications to the center median would take place or the landscaping areas. And again, this works strictly just by a restriping of the road. No additional construction work would be required. Next slide, please. And what we've seen with traffic studies is when you reduce lane width, it does calm and slow traffic. We have heard that there is excessive speed on Carillion Boulevard, and doing something to somehow take that traffic and slow it down would create a better experience, not only for the people that are driving, but the pedestrians and the bicyclists as well. One area that I think from staff standpoint, we'd like City Council to consider what takes place south of the Union Pacific Railroad spur line. That is an area that ultimately could transition to where Carillion does become a 1-lane road, and we'll see that in the next diagram. But this is an area that could transition from the 4-lane road down to a 2-lane road towards Simmerhorn Road. Next slide, please. So this what we're calling potentially alternative 3 starts to lay out the roadway in a context with everything that's going on in this area. You start to see how this roadway fits in with approved projects, whether it be Greenwood Cottages, Parlin Oaks that we're seeing, the Veranda project that's currently building. We're going to be seeing Cedar Flats. You have Liberty Ranch there. And you also have south of the Northeast Pacific Plan, you also have Simmerhorn Ranch. So you start to see a traffic signal that currently exists up on Twin Cities Road. And then you have these blue triangles. And they are the intersections that currently exist from Twin Cities down to Vauxhall. And they are all intersections that we think as staff, we should be looking at, as traffic warrants need some improvements at those intersections. And we do know that there are some intersections, I used to live at Lake Canyon in Carillion. And so I used to see a lot of kids cross that road in the morning or in the afternoon. I know Lake Canyon and Carillion need some help. And the road immediately to the south, when you see Elk Hills in Carillion, that's another high volume crossing area. And you see a lot of kids crossing it. So I think we're taking a look at this alternative and saying, we should take a look at these intersections. And then what do you see past where Simmerhorn Ranch is? As part of the annexation that was approved back in October, we saw the roadway shift. The roadway narrowed as part of those developments. That's what the traffic study said. They didn't need to be as wide of a road. And there are traffic circles within that development, whether it be on Simmerhorn, the extension of what will be A Street, down at Basso. And that seemed to be more appropriate as new development came online, sized the infrastructure needed for that development and how the overall development would build. And so when I kind of look at this potential alternative 3, I do think it meets. I think Galt is working to meet its greenhouse gas and climate change obligations. We have taken a look at how that road works and whether or not roundabouts are appropriate. In this alternative cross section, you're seeing Carillion as it currently exists. We're taking some of the area, some of the width out of the existing travel lanes, and we put it back into the bike lane. Next slide, please. And then again, alternative 3, identifying that in the future, as development in this area warrants, we're going to look at doing improvements to the intersections to enhance pedestrian and bike safety as they warrant, take a review. And each intersection is going to be, they're going to stand on their own. What are the needs of each of those intersections? And we'll take a look at those. And, you know, maybe it is a ped crossing sign or some other type of design feature that separates cars from the pedestrian, you know, other type of things. Could it be a signalized intersection? It could be a stop sign. But the needs of the community and the design of the individual intersections would be reviewed and analyzed as needed. And then it'd come back to the council for some type of approval or authority after a public hearing and approval process. So I want to make sure that everyone understands these are improvements that could take place in the future, but this is just a planning level document that gives us a visioning document of what could take place, but there's still something in the future we need to do. Next slide, and I believe this is my final slide here, staff recommendation.
So Craig,
Again,
I'm going to jump in here and lend a hand here. So council, I just wanted to, again, sort of summarize what Craig has said. And so we have 3 options before us. All options include approving the existing planning study and certification of the environmental document. Option 1 basically rejects the 2 alternatives that were presented to council earlier this year with the excessive roundabouts and the lights. Option 2, Craig just went into excellent detail about changes we can make to the roadway, extending bike lanes, various other places to make it a little more user-friendly. Or option 3, and option 3 gives us the most flexibility because again, as Craig mentioned, as those developments start to build out along Carillion, we will get a chance to see how a particular development has an impact on a particular intersection. And we can, at that point, design a solution to address that particular problem. And so we wanted to make sure that we sum these up for you. These are also summed up on page 6 of 6 of the staff report as well. And so those are the 3 options we're presenting to you tonight. You're welcome to come up with another option, but we thought that these 3 options would at least start the conversation. Personally, I like option 3 because it gives us the most flexibility in the future. Craig's a big fan of option 2 because there are things that can be done. So the discussion is now with council. And Craig, thank you.
Thank you, Craig. So does that conclude the presentation, Craig?
That concludes our presentation. Again, we'd like to turn this back over to council, see if there's any questions we might be able to answer, as well as we'd love to hear from the public.
Okay. I have several questions, but I know I'm sure as a lot of council probably does. I just want to ask one of my questions up front, and then I'm going to turn it over and go through your council members, and then we'll go to public comment. If that's okay. With option 2, I know you and I had a little bit of dialogue on this, Craig. I just want to be very clear. Do any of these options, even option 2, for example, qualify us for this greenhouse funding? Like, is that going to check that box, or is even that option not going to, we're not going to be considered for that?
I don't believe that option 2, although it does enhance bicycle opportunities by making that lane wider, it's not the road diet that the Energy Commission would be looking for. So will that get us future greenhouse gas dollars to do some type of changing to the roadway? I don't believe so. But potentially, maybe that's not what's important here. What's important is creating a roadway that the community wants. And if what the community wants is is a different driving experience that maybe is safer or provides different opportunities for bicyclists or pedestrians. There's other monies out there. And I was talking to our public works director, Mike Selling. Some of those dollars may be tougher to get, but there's different monies out there. And so this was a planning exercise. It showed the community what the Energy Commission's vision is for a roadway. Well, that's the Energy Commission's vision. It isn't this community's vision.
Yeah.
So I think we need to come up with a roadway that makes sense for this community. And I think there are tweaks that we can make to that roadway to make it safer, to provide a different experience, but it just may require some different dollars, and we're going to have to look for those.
Okay, and I know all of us council members are going to have some input. I just wanted to draw a clear distinction as prior to the council's comments here that option 2 or 3, that neither one of them are really hinging on. With either one of those options, I think at this point, unless we're going with the original proposed, roundabouts and or triflow, whatever, that the energy money for this particular grant is not on the table. So really, we're diving into options that really involve other funding, no matter what those options are decided, just on a yes or no answer. Is that am I understand that correctly? Okay.
That's correct. And I do want to make sure that everyone's aware. This grant was from a planning level study. We have not secured any monies. And although there are greenhouse gas grants for physical improvements, we haven't gone after those. We don't know what those would look like. We don't know what the dollars may be. So it's something in the future, but there's no guarantees that the city could even get those grants. I know that they're out there, but we aren't there yet.
Okay. I'm going to go ahead and let our council go around to each council member, and then we'll go to public comment. Start we'll start in order here with our Vice Mayor Sandhu. If you would like to, and again, a lot of us might have a lot of questions, so maybe we can ask. I can go around a couple times so everybody can kind of feed off each other's ideas. So, Vice Mayor, do you have any comments?
First of all, thank you for Craig and Mr. Hind bring us the option we had. You bring us some kind of transparency where we can go, so we can see some kind of light in the tunnel. I'm going to mention something about the option 1. Even the last time when we have a city council meeting on August 18, and this report said they tell us only 2 alternative no. I particularly talked to the city, and that time they said only 1 option. Even my personal opinion, I don't like the option 1 and 2, but even they don't want to consider the option 2. The second thing, the option 1, I'm not a fan of that, but too many things, because the Crillian Boulevard, same thing I said on August 18th, Crillian Boulevard is the best boulevard in the city. And the people living corridor and people living at they spoken. Well, this is a 4-lane boulevard. Why are we making 2 lanes? Most likely there is a lot of construction coming in, as you said, their project, and there can be more traffic. And I've seen most cities, if there's traffic, they add the lane, they do not eliminate. And a third thing, they also said on August 18, they can control the traffic. You cannot control the traffic from 4-lane to 2-lane or 1 lane. And you're also creating some other problem. If there is 1 lane, if somebody driving below the limit, then you holding all the traffic back there. But my making a point, the alternative 1 and 2, option 1 is not, to my opinion, is not, especially if you look at the cost, 19 million, 34 million, and city going in a negative at this time. And 11 roundabout and 11 lights is also not, I'm interested on that. Yes, I was very like an option 2 and 3. Option 2 is there is something, option 3 is very kind of thing. You can approve the document, but later on, whatever is circumstances, whatever the traffic we see, and then department, they can take action on that. Like in same thing, each individual uh, stop sign or each individual, right, they can see what we can improve to do the traffic control. And I know there is a complaint about uh, the people speeding on the Carillion Boulevard, but if you see all the states, people can, speeding, it's very hard to control. And yes, there is control in one way, but it's very hard. The people can control it. There are very few people, they can go on a Lincoln Way. I see all the time on Lincoln Way, the people are increasing the speed. So I'm kind of the option 2 and 3, and especially on option 3 is we have the ability to what we want to do in the future. And my last, just a question when I ask you, if we certified the environmental document, are we going to jeopardize something, whatever is already make the plan? Oh, you already signed the document, environment document, they connected to the Carillion master plan.
In order to satisfy the grant, we need to certify the environmental document. And what the environmental document does is, since we took a review of Carillion Boulevard, it really does give us in the future, if there's an intersection project that needs to be done, if there's a road project that needs to be done, that the council identifies, hey, we need to do this, we would have an environmental document prepared, it would be certified, and effectively we'd have a shovel-ready project. And I think Councilmember Lozano has talked about SACOG and shovel-ready projects, having everything ready to go if something's needed. We don't know what that project is, but having a certified environmental document, that gives the community the greatest level of flexibility moving forward. And it doesn't pin you into a direction that you have to go in one way or another, because you're not approving alternative 1 or 2. You're certifying this environmental document, and then you're saying, hey, in the future, if something happens to the roadway, if something happens to the intersections, we should look at that.
Thank you, Craig. That's why I just like to clarification myself to the public. If we're going to, in the future, is going to prove that environmental document, we're not approving the alternative 1 and 2. That's right.
Correct.
All right, I'm gonna give the next council member a chance, then I will come back if I have another question.
Thank you, Vice
Thank
Mayor.
you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Papineau, do you have some comments on this matter?
Yeah, I do. Thank you. A couple things. We talked about under the new option 3, basically waiting to see what development happens and then determine what the road needs. I think that might be a little bit backwards in some cases, specifically the northwest corner of Carillion and Walnut. It's going to be commercial. I think that the development of the road may be necessary to determine what kind of development can go in there, what kind of entrance and egress there's going to be possible. So I don't like necessarily the idea of waiting to see what happens with development and then decide what kind of road or what kind of intersections we need for it. And I favor the idea of having a master plan that would cover one end to the other. Example of what happens when you don't do that, go over to Rayleigh's and drive west through the parking lot until you get to East Stockton, and you'll see where the AM/PM driveway, the McDonald's driveways, the Starbucks driveway, F&M drive-through, all collide into one. We put all the developments in, and then we have this road that, you know, on any given Saturday morning is a nightmare. So I don't want, you know, to see us doing that. I'm kind of going backwards there. Secondly, as far as the bike lane goes, currently I walk it or drive that road every day, and it is definitely, other than for daring or experienced bicyclists, not practical or useful. The current width of the bike lane gives you a foot to 18 inches clearance if you're riding a bike and pulling a child trailer behind it. You know, it makes it just impossible with in a gutter, and 6 to 8 inches, 10 inches on each side of clearance for just a little trailer like that. You know, if in the end we want to have a road where somebody could go from, say, Lake Canyon and Carillion and ride over to downtown and go to the farmer's market, I don't think our current half gutter, you know, 4-foot wide bike lane will ever encourage that. Currently, anybody, as I said, other than experienced bicyclists or the daring ones, ride up on the sidewalk. I don't blame them, but you know, it does make it a little bit harder, especially when you have pedestrians on the sidewalk, walking dogs with leashes, and it makes it impractical. So I don't think the current bike lane will ever encourage any kind of use of a bicycle transportation. The excessive speed complaints, I can tell you, are definitely factual. There's no question about that. And yeah, I think that's about all I have right now.
Okay, thank you. And we will circle back to every council member. So there'll be plenty of time for us all to make comments as you might think of other things as we go along. Councilmember Vandenberg.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to review what can and cannot be changed with each option. So if that makes sense, if you look at the map, I'm not sure what slide that was about, maybe slide 14, but it had an overview with the triangles and the 3 roundabouts south of the railroad tracks. The 3 roundabouts are part of the new construction, and those will be installed, yes or no?
That is correct. Yes, it will.
So for option 3, that gives the flexibility from everything from nothing to roundabouts, with stops, lights, and stop signs being somewhere in the middle, correct?
Correct. That would be taking a look at each intersection as it's needed and bringing it back to council and having some type of public review in which, yes, it does give you the greatest flexibility.
And the timeline on that option would be infinite, basically.
As those intersections need it.
Okay, great. For option 2, how would that scenario, you know, what's the extremes of what can and cannot be done?
That option would really take a look at as funding came available, and it wouldn't take place all at once. You could do it in segments, but you'd take a look at that roadway and it would reconfigure the existing lanes, taking about a foot out of each of the lanes. Currently, they're about 11.5 feet in width, I believe, and shrinking those down and adding additional width to the bike lane, as well as taking a look at intersection improvements that would be needed. So really the big difference between option 2 and option 3, option 3 really just focuses on the intersection, and option 2 takes a look at the road and the intersection. So the difference is really the road improvements between option 2 and 3.
So option 2 could include a roundabout at, let's say, Walnut and Carillion.
It could, after a review by the council.
Again, with no, with an endless timeline.
Correct. And I think what the council has to be aware of is when we're doing this project, again, planning level, and at this point in time, there are not warrants that would say that these improvements need to be made now. They would be well into the future. They could be 10 to 30 years in the future.
Yeah, I understand that. And, you know, I made a point of driving that area of town more. And there's certainly, you know, it's difficult to get across the road in several of the intersections. Uh, I'm actually surprised the speed limit's that high, you know. But that's all the questions I have for right now.
Right.
Thank you. Councilmember Lozano, I'm sure you have lots of comments.
I just have a few comments. Actually, Councilmember Papineau hit on a few that I was going to make. But I do want to say this. I think that whatever we do here on this boulevard, it has to be right for Galt. And whatever that is, it needs to be, I think, very deliberate and well thought out. I think kicking the can down the road of speed and our community, whether it's our residents or people that are visiting our community, not stopping at stop signs is not the right way to go. I think we need to address that issue. Certainly, as Councilmember Vandenberg said, there are a few intersections, and I'll just point them out: Lake Canyon and Elk Hills, that you can't get out of coming east or west. And I drive it pretty regularly. As many of you know, I live on right off of Carillion Boulevard. And so just a couple of comments real briefly, because I do want to hear from the public. I think that's going to be an important piece in this. I don't want to look at intersections as a policy matter, not as a pick an intersection matter, but as a policy matter. I don't think that it would be viable or a smart idea to look at intersections in a silo. Each intersection affects the other. And so as we move forward, I believe it's important to, and I'm just going to pick one, Walnut and Carillion, which happens to be in my backyard. Just looking at that intersection alone would be foolish, because just south of that, we have two pedestrian crossings with lights that work intermittently. I think people were stealing the batteries from some time. And then just south of that, there's a four-way controlled stop sign intersection. So whatever we did with Carillion and Walnut, and again, I'm just using that as one example, moving south, we would have to consider the pedestrian crossing as well as the crossing there at just south of that, the four-way stop. And then just a couple of points from the community that I've heard in the past. There's a real interest in reducing speed and having a safer roadway, but also a real interest in either enforcement and or by design reducing speed, and the fact that people don't stop at stop signs. You know, for a short time, when the intersection of Elk Hills and Walnut by the fire station got the stop signs, people were very, very happy. And I know why, because kids were crossing and whatnot. And then after a short time, people started saying, well, no one stops at them. Well, can you put an officer there? Well, yeah, we could put one of our two motorcycle officers there for a short period of time during rush hour. So I think that it's going to be real important that we at least look at those intersections, like I said, not in the silo. And like I said, I've got some more input as it relates to options 2 and 3, but I certainly want to hear from the public on what their thoughts are.
Thank you, Councilmember Lozano. And yeah, the public comment will be important here for all of us. I just want to touch on a couple quick things before we get to that public comment. Kind of touching on some things that Councilmember Lozano and Papineau and Vandenberg all said. I do agree with Mr. Lozano that I know that 3 seems to be the most flexible, but I do worry that if we look at everything individually, my biggest concern with 3 would be that we just say, let's just look at them as they come. And then it's just put on a back shelf, and then nothing ever happens. I think several of us have touched on topics about certain intersections that we feel have a real need for something to be done right now. Lake Canyon at Crillian, Elk Hills at Crillian, two intersections that have very dangerous crossing for and that are used by school age children. Maybe not right now, but they are. And I feel like we definitely need to do something. Whatever the plan we decide on tonight, I do feel like we should do something deliberate. I like the word that he used, and also Mr. Papanow touched on this. I think it is important that we kind of have a plan. We can agree on maybe some things that okay, these are things that we think need to be addressed. Let's look at fund. Let's decide what those are, and let's see if we can go after funding to do those. But I do feel like we need to do something. Again, originally the big point of contention was the road diet and the number of roundabouts. I think that's what the citizens were most about. So I think once you remove those out of the equation, I think you start getting into a real compromise of what people might be willing to go with. And the speed limit that Mr. Lozano mentioned, the bad part is you have a 45-mile-an-hour speed limit. People always drive 10 miles faster. So now people are going 55. I've been told by Public Works, well, we can't reduce the speed limit because it doesn't warrant X, Y, Z, whatever. But I no offense to Public Works, I don't like excuses. I just want to say, how can we make people go slower? Can we not do that? But we need more enforcement. Enforcement can only be for a short time, and then people just start speeding again. But I think it's a multifaceted solution. But definitely, there's some major safety concerns on the road that all of us are agreeing that we need to do something. So I think that's where we're going to really find some common ground here. But let's move on to public comment, and then we'll go back around to the council after public comment and let everybody go again with more. So do we have any public comment, Tina?
I have no written comments.
Okay. Ms. Roddicker, do we have any hands raised online?
Yes, we do have one hand raised. We have Jerry Sauter. Jerry, go ahead and speak. You're on.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Of course, it's me here talking. I've been passionate following this process since the beginning, and it sure does seem like it's the gift that keeps on giving. I do want to thank Mr. Hoffman and Mr. Hines for their work in sort of repackaging something that we've been looking at for probably the last 2 years and providing some really viable options. I would just like to echo what Mayor Farmer said, that I think we don't want to lose sight of the fact that I think the community is asking for things to be done now. I don't know, necessarily what that would entail, and I think that's, you've got some options on the table, but I think it's important that rather than just picking an option that kind of shelves the project, I know you've got to approve the environmental documents, and I think it's important that you satisfy the terms of the grant. But we've been presented this as, it's going to solve greenhouse gases that we need to do. Then it was going to be, well, it's going to improve safety, but then it's going to do this, and then it's going to do that. And it's been kind of rebranded so many different ways that I think the public has gotten a little numb to what ultimately this is about. So I'm almost at the point as a member of the public, approve what you need to approve to ensure the grant is satisfied, and then pick an option that gives you some flexibility to do some things in the not too distant future. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sauter. We appreciate your input each time.
Thank you.
Do we have any additional hands raised, Rose?
We currently have no other hands raised.
Okay. Well, at this time, I want to go ahead and just circle back again to each council member so we can have a little more in-depth discussion. So we'll start with Vice Mayor Sandu.
Yeah, the option 3, the reason I was, supporting, or I was leaning toward option 3, but they have more flexibility. That's not mean we can just prove that and we can sit down. I believe the staff, their report said, then after that we approve, then they can look up each intersection, and then it will working proactively which one they can bring, or they can bring whatever research or whatever consultation bring back to the council or planning commissioner, then we can react on that. And option two, I also, as you know, I'm talking about that their bike lane. I walk every day. There is a very narrow walk, bike, and people, um, they are biking on the sidewalk. Because there is very good sidewalk over there. I say nobody driving. But Mike, uh, Mr. Hoffman, my question is you said these lanes are 11 and a 5, right? And what's the minimum requirement as a city to the lanes?
And I'm going to have to call on our Public Works Director, Mike Selling. I think he can provide some additional information as far as lane width. Lane width also has to do with speed, but as far as the other questions, what happens when you take a look at in an intersection? And I think Councilmember Lozano said, well, I don't want to do this, just looking at one. We have to look at something comprehensively. And I think Mike can answer that question as well.
That's fine. You don't need to answer right away, but that's my, and the other thing, the bike lane is making a little bit wide. It makes sense, so the people are riding bike over there is convenient for them. On option 3, I believe we have a more flexibility, and I want to done something over there too. That's not means, we can approve the document and sit down, and that's why I'm not going to agree with the staff. We need to proactive, and the staff is, I believe their mean is when they can have, we have more flexibility, and then they can look them up and then bring back to the council. It is randomly or which intersection is more important. They can bring that and we can work from there. And that's just my opinion, but I'm open to willing. I think everybody make a comment. We want to make sure every person over there be safe all the things. Speed should be I know the people are speeding over there. So whatever we need to use or force, law enforcement, or we need to make that the road is can decrease the speed limit.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. And again, we will definitely, everybody will have an additional opportunity if you'd like to speak. This won't be your last chance. We'll move on to Councilmember Papineau. Additional thoughts from you?
Yeah, I like the way Councilmember Lozano put it, that this all affects each other, which is kind of what I was trying to get to is, we have to have a plan, I think, for this roadway, that because it's going to dictate somewhat of the development and make sure that it grows out from there rather than having development that dictates the center of our road when we're more limited. One question, I know we talked about that roundabouts are planned for the south end and the new development. Is it, to my way of thinking, if we leave it 4 lanes, roundabouts are no longer an option. I know they work in a great big area like out at Twin Cities in 99, but I think, and Craig, you can correct me if I'm wrong, or Mike, in this confined area, we leave it 4 lanes and then try and have a 2-lane roundabout, that's not going to be a practical or safe alternative. Is that correct?
I'll answer. Let's see, Craig. Yeah, actually, no, you can do, council member, you can do a 2-lane roundabout. In fact, it would actually make it a little bit easier. What we would likely do, and again, we'd have to take another look at the volumes as to when this might be happening, what those, current and projected volumes would be. Let's say we're talking 5-10 years down the road here, is to see, can a 1-lane roundabout accommodate the volumes? And if it can, then it actually becomes easier because you've got that wider footprint already, the 4-lane facility to use, and you'd have less right-of-way impacts. And then you can do other things too. You can use hardscaping or other features to essentially delineate the the traversable roadway for vehicle traffic, basically send signals to the driver as to where they're supposed to be. So there are ways that you can actually utilize that additional space, if you will, but it would be predicated on probably a single lane roundabout in each direction. Yeah, if you're asking for a full 2-lane, what we call like a 2x2, or a 2x1 in this case, 1 lane for the intersecting roads and 2 lanes for the Carillion legs, then it would take a wider footprint, you're correct, and you would have some significant potential right-of-way impacts. So.
Okay. I appreciate that. That was my thought is, and we are, as we've said over and over, years out on, some of these and decades out on others where they would trigger the need. But, other than a roundabout or a variation of that, your option, we limit ourselves to a stoplight or a stop sign, and we create, a long stop and go roadway. Whereas I think I want to be able to address the safety concerns now, the speed, the bicycle and pedestrian safety, and do something. But I also want to, in the long term, be able to have an attractive, slower pace, that small town feel everybody wants, attractive roadway that, can flow smoothly from one end of here to the other. And as I said before, provide a way for somebody to ride their bike over to Old Town if they wanted to. So, I'd like to see a more of a, not something that's definitive, that's going to lock us into a certain plan, but something that is, going to have the foresight so that we're not putting this together piecemeal, where we're going down a road that has, 2 or 3 different varieties of bike lanes or whatever. I think that's all for now.
Good thoughts, Mr. Papineau. Councilmember Vandenberg, additional thoughts so far?
Yeah, the speed limit is definitely a problem, and doing something proactively as soon as possible. Part of that would be getting another officer, which I believe their budget has room for, which allow us to provide better enforcement. Personally, I'd like to see stoplights near the schools. That way kids can pass safely. People are too often distracted with their phones. Roundabouts, they're a yield aggressive. In the country, there's a yield sign, but you're yield defensive. You're expecting to brake. In a roundabout, it's yield aggressive. You're slowing down, but you're expecting to go through. So there's psychology is different when approaching the intersection. I know it's been mentioned before, but maybe it could just be gone over again for myself and the public, that what would we have to do to change the speed limit? To me, if the speed limit was dropped to 35 and enforced, that would go a long way in making crossing the road safer for pedestrians, safer for bicyclists when the road is, or if the road is reduced in size, all those things.
Yeah, I can answer that. Yeah, council member, as far as to do a speed reduction, it essentially requires a speed survey. And by that, what's typically done is you put a dual tube system out to, like you see for the traffic counts. But when you see one tube, that means they're just counting the number of cars or vehicles that are going through. When you see 2 tubes that are real close together, they're basically not only counting, but they're also measuring the speed of those vehicles. And that's determined by the time lag difference between hitting the first tube and hitting the second tube. So they can determine the speed from that. And the way the Streets and Highways Code reads is you set the speed basically within 5 miles per hour of what's called the 85th percentile speed. And what the 85th percentile speed is essentially for, let's say just a simple math here, 100 vehicles go through in the speed survey. And the speed survey time period is typically 3 to 5 days. So they'll be out there for, a few days. And the thing is, you don't just want to get an anomaly of a heavy day or, a day when the traffic's light and people may be driving faster because the traffic's light. So anyway, back to the 100 vehicles, 85, and the rule is 85th percentile is basically saying that 85% of the driving population will drive at a speed that is comfortable. Okay, and there's always going to be 15% that are going to drive faster. And so that's kind of where they set it as, again, within 5 miles an hour of the 85th percentile. So if we put out the tubes and do the speed survey and the 85th percentile comes back at, let's say, 45 miles an hour, the lowest we could make it would be 40 miles per hour in order to be enforceable. And I don't know if the chief may have some perspective from his side of this, but anyway, that's what we're limited to by the Streets and Highways Code. We could go faster, but the thing is basically if the 85th percentile is coming in at that example of 45 miles an hour, I mean, we could physically put a sign out for 35 or 30 or whatever you wanted. It would not be enforceable. And what would basically happen is most of the people would ignore it because that's just too slow of a speed to be comfortable for that facility. So hopefully that explains it.
That goes back to the narrowing street, narrowing the painting lines, the width of that helps a little bit, right? All of those things. Is there any other traffic calming techniques that can be used to bring the speed down naturally?
So yeah, just real quick on the striping. Basically, the studies have shown that there's what we call a context sensitivity. And that's meaning if you give some kind of visual cue to the driver, meaning a striped lane or some object, whether it's a curb or what we call a chicane, which is a narrowing of the roadway, or other things that you can do to calm the traffic, to slow the speed. The thing is at a higher speed arterial roadway like this, a 4-lane divided roadway, this is what basically the highest classification, short of a highway or a freeway, but the highest local roadway classification, is the speeds tend to be higher. And so, doing the restriping would be the most cost effective, at least remedy we could do to try to calm the speeds. And it would vary. We'd have to, obviously give it some time afterwards to kind of let people get used to it. But generally people drive the lines. And so when the lines are narrower, they slow down accordingly to stay within the lines.
Have cities or do cities put out the tubes with heavy enforcement to help get a speed limit that is enforceable?
No, you don't want to do it with enforcement because you want to get what people are truly driving without the presence of law enforcement to, modify their behavior, so to speak. So you want to do it without law enforcement there. What some agencies will do is they will put like the speed feedback trailer out, that says your speed is X as you go by. They'll put those out like a week or two ahead to try to calm the traffic a bit to, hey, you're, obey the speed limit kind of thing, and then put out the tubes the following week. The only problem with that is it can give you a, a sense of, or a false sense, I guess, of what the true speeds are. Because if you basically, are putting drivers on notice and then they slow down, like I think someone said earlier, for a short period of time, and then it's back to normal again, maybe a few weeks later. So you usually don't do law enforcement when you put the speed tubes out.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Councilmember Vandenberg. Councilmember Lozano, your additional thoughts?
Yeah, I won't reiterate what my colleagues have said already. Just in terms of the staff report, I too think that option 2 gives us the most flexibility, and I think I think by increasing the bicycle lane width would narrow the lane width slightly. don't know that a cyclist right away would start riding it, but I think that it would slow the traffic down, however slight. I just think that option three um, it just doesn't address the immediate concern. So, um, but you know, at least option two is an attempt at it. And like I said, I really think that we need to look at those two specific intersections up north of Walnut. Um, certainly, maybe not today, as most of our kids aren't in schools, but when schools go back in session, I think at each one of those intersections within a block or two, there's an elementary school. So, um, but I appreciate the report. I appreciate the study session on this. I thank you all, the staff, for your input. And I think we do need at some level to have some consistency for Carillion Boulevard. As it stands now, approved and undeveloped area, we have 4 different types of roadways. Um, for me, who I live over here, and folks that travel Carillion Boulevard regularly, it's not a big deal because we expect once we get past south of Vauxhall to Summerhorn, it's going to be a 2-lane country road. We expect when we go up north to Carillion and Walnut, that it's going to be this big, huge intersection where I want to mention, I don't mean to be funny about this, but you know, we've talked about traffic controls and safety. There are still people who get into traffic collisions at Walnut and Carillion. It's a true story. And if there is no obstructed views, there are 4 stop signs where people are supposed to stop. And I don't know how the collisions happen, but they're still happening. And so for those that believe that stop signs will be helpful, I just point to that intersection and say, not all intersections are they helpful. So we really need to be, like I said, deliberate about what we're doing with each of these intersections. So again, thank you. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Councilmember Lozano. Again, good points by everybody. So I've been listening to what my fellow council members have been saying, and I don't want to reiterate too much either on what others, but I think, you know, originally when this was looked at as a 4-lane, this boulevard was designed as an artery with all the outlying streets as, I guess you could call them like arterials. So originally, even based on the traffic report, was that by doing the road diet, we were going to force traffic and spread it out onto those arterials. For me, that I'm not in favor of anything like that, because for me, this is all about safety. That's my number 1 priority with anything we do on the street, and to force people onto the surface streets where these are people's neighborhoods and people are driving by the front of people's yards where kids are playing and stuff. We want to keep that traffic on the arteries. That's what they're designed to do. You know, Carillion, Walnut, those are the 2 main arteries. I do agree. I do agree with Councilor Papa now. I would not personally be opposed to doing some widening of the bike lane. I think that it is a dangerous lane. I think if it was a very simple thing that could be done to make it that much safer, I would be in favor of that for sure. And as far as the traffic study conversation that Mike was very interesting, and I think what I would suggest is if we do look at a couple of the what you have here is you have 2.1 miles from Twin Cities to Summerhorn currently, without even talking about the extension. I know we have roundabouts slated for Summerhorn and Carillion and all down where the Summerhorn Ranch. So those are already kind of a foregone conclusion that they're going to be there. So we're really just talking about that north. So we're talking about from Summerhorn, you know, as Carillion exists now. And we're talking about 2 miles. There's only 3 stops. You have a stop at Carillion, you have a stop at Vintage Oak, and then you have somewhere. So you break that street into 3 pieces. So that basically you're looking at like, you know, 3/4 of a mile each piece. I mean, you know, people drag race on a 1/4 mile. So I think the real problem with the speeding is that you just have too great of length of distance that people can just comfortably just be carrying along at 55 miles an hour for a great deal. And while doing that, they cross through 2 intersections, specifically Lake Canyon and Elk Hills, that have stop signs east to west, but no stopping north to south, and north to south, or I'm sorry, no stopping north to south, but east to west is where you have your pedestrian traffic crossings. You have your children, and those are very dangerous. So just getting down to talking about the traffic study, I think if we were to do something controlling those intersections and basically chopping up Carillion, not into 15 pieces, but chopping into smaller pieces, is going to naturally, I think, control the speeds at which people could go. Maybe after that, we could do a traffic study like Mike described, where we would naturally see the slowing of traffic a little more, and then we could justify bringing the speed limit down based on people's natural habits, I guess there was discussed. So with all that being said, down to brass tacks, look, I think we need to be deliberate. I think Mr. Lozano and Mr. Papineau said it very well. I don't think just saying let's just look at them as it comes. I'm leery of that because I feel like it won't get done. I feel like we should focus on a few serious things that we all can agree on. Maybe it's the two intersections that needed addressing. Maybe it is a roundabout at Walnut. Maybe that intersection could use a large 2-lane roundabout. We don't know what's going to go on the commercial corner that's not planned yet. So we don't know the egress and such for coming in out of that. So that would be a little complicated. But I think if we were to focus on a couple points of safety, like the two intersections, focus on those, better lighting, pedestrian signage, the ones like we did with Safe Routes to School, where it's lit up like a Christmas tree and it's blinking and flashing and all that, to make it the safest that we could possibly make it for our kids and the people in that area, possibly widening that bike lane with some simple striping without causing, a huge construction project. Those would address several safety concerns that I think would make a lot of the community very happy. And I think that if we were to come up with some kind of tentative plan to do something at those and look at those areas specifically, I think that some of the other things like speeding would naturally just come a little bit under control. I'm not saying they would be solved, but I think that we would see some kind of impact on those. And so that's kind of where I'm at. And I think that saying that kind of feels like more, I'm like kind of leaning towards option 2, where we can kind of come up with a little bit of a plan about where we want to focus on, and we can give some formal direction to staff to go after some funding or look for something to do something sooner than later. Because I don't want to just go with option 3 and shelve it and then say, oh, let's just look at them, piecemeal it. I think we do need to look at it as kind of an overall thing. So I think we're really close to some compromise, and I don't think we're going to solve that right now in this meeting. But if I would like to just say how I feel, I'm leaning towards option 2 at this point. I think we need to accept the environmental plan, which I think we all can agree on that probably, so that we can have shovel ready stuff. But I think what I'm hearing from a lot of my council members, I think we could come up with a majority consensus here that we could selectively pick target areas that we want to focus on and go after funding. So that's my thoughts. I don't know if anybody else would be supportive of something like that. I'd love to hear your comments if somebody wants to jump in. Any council member have any thoughts on what I just said? Councilmember Van.
I could support option 2 if amended not to have roundabouts north of Simmerhorn.
Okay, I agree that well, I am the two intersections that Rich mentioned. Excuse me, Councilmember Lozano, Lake Hills. I mean, last time we talked about this curling thing, I am convinced that roundabouts are not safe for pedestrians. And so for those two intersections, which I feel like have a really pedestrian safety issue, I don't feel like roundabouts is going to solve that. To me, roundabouts solves a traffic congestion problem, and it may solve a speeding problem to a point, but you have people entering an intersection at speed. I don't feel like it's safe for pedestrians. I've walked roundabouts myself just to kind of get a feel for it, and I don't have any confidence in being that a child would be safe in a roundabout. So I wouldn't want to see roundabouts at those two intersections. I would be open-minded to Walnut, Carillion possibly, but so I agree with Jay on part of that. Rich, do you have any thoughts on what we just talked about right now?
Yeah, here's the beauty of it, at least from my perspective, is we don't have to make that decision right now. And again, I wasn't going to bring this up, but I am a huge roundabout fan. I've lived through them. I've worked around schools that have them. That we have an elementary school up in my district that has a roundabout right at the intersection where everybody comes, and it's quite safe for pedestrian traffic, for vehicle traffic. I mean, they're just safe. Back in my running days, I would run in a neighborhood that had several roundabouts and had no problems managing it. There are times where you'll see on a Sunday morning where a car's gone through the center of it, but that just means they would have blown through an intersection drunk or falling asleep. So I'm a huge proponent of roundabouts. 11, probably not, but but I think they do the job. I do know that people are a lot more patient when they're moving, and as long as people can continue to move in a vehicle, that's why people don't stop at stop signs, because they get impatient. So those are just my thoughts. I would like to leave it open to the experts. I do agree with you, Mayor Farmer, that we'd have to look at something of those two intersections that you mentioned, because the roundabout design on that didn't appear to be conducive for those intersections. So maybe it's a yield sign. I don't know. But I wouldn't want to hamstring, as this comes back to us, I wouldn't want to hamstring us into saying absolutely no to a particular device, even a stop sign for that matter, to, for us or future councils to have to then turn, come back and say, well, that is the best for it or not. So those are just my thoughts. And again, I like the idea that we have a couple of days to chew on it before we have to make a decision. But I think making a decision is going to be important. So those are just my thoughts.
Craig, go ahead.
And when we put together the exhibit for what a Carillion traffic control would look like, we just came up with these blue triangles, and we call them controlled intersections. And although I've given you some ideas, could it be a signal? Could it be a traffic circle? Could it be a stop sign? Could it be a pedestrian flashing? When we were originally developing some type of language, we were just saying staff would work to develop improvements to enhance pedestrian and bicycle safety and conduct intersection control evaluations as traffic conditions called for. We weren't getting specific. I've given you some examples, but I don't think as far as our language that we were trying to say, oh, it's a traffic circle here, or if it's a stop here. It was giving us the flexibility to say pedestrian, bicycle, vehicular safety is important, and we'd look at implementing something that would be best for those intersections.
Okay.
But I think I'd want to keep it open. I'd want the flexibility.
And again, you're not looking at, we're not looking at deciding between option 2 and 3 tonight. This is just a study session. You're not looking for a motion from us to go with 2 or 3. This is just discussing the 3 options that you're presenting with us tonight.
Well, I was looking for some direction because ultimately I need to go back, prepare a staff report and come back for some type of public hearing. I'm not looking for you to make a decision tonight, but I am looking for a majority direction. And I think so far I've heard option 2 is at least got 3 votes, and potentially more if I can craft the language to give the flexibility to have greater direction in the future.
Well, and I think options 2 and 3 are very similar. Honestly, I think there's just a couple maybe sticking points for interpretation. I feel like some of us just we want some kind of plan. We want some kind of larger idea. I think that's what some of us are saying, but also we want flexibility, and we don't want to be tied into specifics. So we want a larger plan and a larger vision of doing something, maybe at those intersections or whatever. But we don't want to say exactly what. And I think if we can all agree on that, I think we can maybe accept the report. Obviously, I'll entertain a motion for someone or some consensus, a direction to do that with maybe kind of an understanding of that we want staff to come back and see what we could do, or come back with some ideas, I guess, to the council on what we could do at some of these locations. Is that kind of what I'm understanding from the council, Rich? Or does that sound on point? Councilmember Lozano or Councilor Papineau? I know those were kind of trying to touch on what you guys were saying.
Mayor Farmer, can I make a comment?
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Let's put this is a study session. I maybe say, oh, I'm leaning towards option 3, but I'm also flexible. And I also, we need to more time to study, especially today, not that many public comment, but that's for the study session. So I'm talking about, I think every council member should we have some kind of flexibility, and when we make a decision, I think tonight we are not make a decision. If we make a decision, then we, then it's agenda item. And I believe study session, I believing in, I don't know, we already heard everybody's opinion. And I tell myself, I have flexibility. I want to better what the safety for the people. And even the study session, there are many public comment, and I maybe gonna come more public comment, and then my, opinion may be changed. And I'm not gonna make any commitment to it.
Mr. Mayor,
Yeah, please go ahead. I was going to ask you to jump in here and clarify what we're looking for here.
so it sounds like that we actually have a bit of a hybrid between option 2 and option 3. And so while we like the changes that are, some of the changes, or not necessarily the specific changes, but just the fact that something's going to be done in option 2. And I hear the council members at option 3, just, it looks like it's flexible, but there's no pressure to get that master plan, as Councilmember Papineau mentioned, get that in place. So it's almost as if we should adopt elements of option 2, keep some of the flexibility of option 3 with time limits. And so I'm almost looking at an option where, where we're designing various things to go into various intersections and roadway improvements to be placed into a master plan that is to be drafted and completed by a particular date. And the actual specifics of those intersections can be left to the future, or we can build them in now. And I think that I'm hearing some of the council members, we're okay. We know that these intersections need to be dealt with. We're okay with the time limit. But, we may not want a roundabout there. We may want a stoplight there. We may want a flashing ped. So I hear that need for flexibility as well. And gentlemen, if I have this wrong, please correct me, but that's what I'm hearing so far.
Does any council member want to jump in and comment on what Mr. Hines just said?
I think he has the gist of the matter quite well.
I agree too. I wouldn't want to limit us to what the experts may find necessary. I know we all come from our own experiences. I, like Councilmember Lozano, spent quite a bit of time driving and walking near roundabouts. If you haven't driven from Waterman east on Elk Grove Boulevard, one lane in each direction and smooth flowing and, generally safe with, with pedestrian access. When you're crossing a one lane roundabout, you have to look in one spot for that car. You're not crossing 2 lanes where the first lane may stop, but the next one may speed by, like our current situation on Carillion. So I wouldn't want to rule out any of those ideas that, again, the experts may help us, or may determine we need in the future.
Okay. So it sounds like maybe the solution will depend on where we see the traffic flow going. Luckily, we've got Mike and his team and Craig and his team who can give us some idea, and maybe we can project what that traffic flow will look like based on the developments that we see, the number of houses, the types of families, the types of commute. As Councilmember Papineau said, you've got commercial there. So maybe we take those 2 options and we just compress them together and we come up with a solution that allows us to project where we think that traffic's going. And then at each of those intersections, we can basically suggest we think this solution or this solution will work. These other solutions won't work based on where we see things going, or just presenting options at each intersection. And that grand plan, all of those options will work together depending on which way we go. So it's going to be a sort of a tiered approach. But I want to make sure we have the master plan, but at the same time, still give you some flexibility as to which tool we use to fix these intersections as we see the traffic, because the roundabout that we think will work today may not work, and we may have to shift gears. And I think, as you all have mentioned, just leave ourselves that flexibility, because Mike may come back and say, no, that won't work.
Can I make a suggestion then? It seems like we all agree that we want to do something. We just have to figure out if we can all agree on what that is, but we definitely want to do something and not nothing. So I think we can all come to that. But what I would like to see in whatever decision we would be some sort of urgency to address those two intersections. And it could be something like, can we just fix the crossing that's there now? We know we have some that don't work very well. The lights are dim, or we've had, I guess, the batteries stolen off or whatever. But if we can do something and try to put some sort of urgency with addressing the safety of those crossings without making it a stop sign or a roundabout or anything like that, if we can just enhance the crossing as it is now in some form or another, if we can at least some sort of urgency behind that is what all I'm asking for, that comes out of this discussion. I don't know if we as the council could agree on something like that, but I do think that, like you mentioned, you said it very well, Mr. Hines. We need to come up with a master plan that we want to, that we can come back, a watered down version of everything we've seen up to this point. But I just want to see, what I don't want to do is have, school's not in right now. So right now we have a unique opportunity to really try to pursue something. I don't want to see in a year from now, when school is back in, those intersections are exactly the way they are now. That's all I'm saying.
Understood. So if council is okay, we can go back and Mike and Craig and I can look at what we anticipate the traffic flow will be, and then we will come back to council, and maybe if we can fit it in the timelines, maybe we just have another study session and present what we found and what we recommend. Now that we know that we want the structure of we want structure, but we also want flexibility. And so now that we have that general direction, we can go back and take a look at that.
Okay. Does anybody have any input on that right there? It sounds like basically going to come back with some ideas for us. Is everybody okay with that? I'm looking for just a consensus here. Rich, go ahead.
Yeah, I do. I think that's perfect. I think something that intrigues me, though, is the idea of looking at Carillion Boulevard bike lane widening. And I'll just be very transparent here. Again, it may not get cyclists off the sidewalks right away, but at some point I think it will, and it will also potentially narrow down our 2 lanes that we already have to hopefully slow some people down in the interim. That may be a totally pie in the sky thought on my part. I will admit I'm not 100% sure on that, but if we could at least take a look at that as we're moving forward, that would be awesome.
I would be in favor of looking at that as well. I have no problem with, I just was adamantly opposed to the road diet in the beginning, but I have no problem, as I mentioned earlier when Kevin brought it up, that I would be in favor of doing some restriping or something with the bike lanes to make them safer. Absolutely. So if that could be in the new idea list, please.
No problem. We'll make that happen. And full transparency, your city manager is a road cyclist, so I understand.
Professionally?
No.
Okay.
I only have one job.
So we won't lose you to that. Okay. Got it.
So I think we're pretty clear on kind of what we're doing. So Jay, Councilmember Vandenberg, go ahead.
Yeah, can we entertain a motion just to accept the study and just take that part off the table?
Do we need to do that, or
can we?
Lorenzo, Mr. Hines?
Harriet? That might be a Harriet question. This presented as a study session. We didn't actually present the item for vote. So I'll have to ask Harriet to weigh in. Or
Okay.
Kimberly.
Hi.
Kimberly.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Sorry. It's probably better that they give direction and you bring it back.
Okay.
Because you set it up for a study session and there was no anticipated action.
Understood.
Yeah, and I don't have any resolutions for you. I don't have the documents. You don't have the packet in front of you to approve anything at this point in time. This was just going to be a let's talk this through, let's get some direction and come back at a later date.
Okay. So is it possible, and this goes to Harriet and Craig, that when we bring this back to council for review to take a look at the design, that in that action we can get the environmental and planning documents approved as a sort of a separate actions, or do they all need to be done together?
So you need to have the you need to have the environmental approved if you're going to start taking action on items that are within the scope of the plan and the environmental. So you need to do that first, and then with those resolutions, and then take the specific actions that you want to actually build or continue with. So, I mean, Kimberly or I can work with Craig to put a schedule together and make sure that you have the notices out, and then you can bring it all back at one meeting. We just have to parse out the notice requirements.
Understood. Understood. Okay, so we'll go back to the lab, so to speak, and come up with a plan that allows us to have sort of a overarching master plan, yet flexibility at the points, at the pressure points as well. So I think Mike and Craig and I will work on that, and we'll bring it back to council.
Okay, so just to clarify, exactly like you said, but also some input on.
Mike.
Right. Okay.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so do we have, before I get off this topic and move on, do we have any public comment, Tina?
No written comment.
Any hands raised online, Rose?
We have no hands currently raised online.
All right, thank you. Well, if we have no further comments on this matter from council members, I'm looking around. Okay, then we will think it was a good discussion, and I appreciate everybody's input. I think we had a good discussion on it, so thank you all. Moving on to our next item, which would be item 4 from our regular calendar from our police department. And the subject is the police department police radio purchase. And this will be presented by our interim police chief, Brian Kalinowski. Chief.
Yes, good evening again, Mayor and council members. Before you is a request by the police department to purchase 30 police portable radios with Measure R funding and amending our budget to accommodate this purchase. In reviewing our inventory, and this is something we've been aware of and made requests for the past several years, we recognize that our existing portable radios stopped production in 2014, and the service life beyond that production was 5 years. So the actual manufacturing or the manufacturer's work ended in November of 2019. We're currently using a third-party vendor, Delta Wireless, to maintain our radios. But the problem is parts are becoming harder to get. And so we're starting to cannibalize older equipment to keep the more newer radios in the 10-year range moving. Of course, this is not a long-term solution for us as a police organization. And due to the deferred maintenance on these or the deferred purchase on these, we're up against a request to purchase 30 portable radios. About 3, maybe 4 years ago, we did purchase the initial 12 portable radios of the same style portable. So with this purchase, we will fully equip all sworn officers in the department, which is 38, and leave us with 4 spare radios available for deployment in times when we have repairs going on at the radio shop. This purchase will be made through a cooperative agreement with Sacramento County. And as I noted before, the estimated cost of this for the purchase of the equipment and then subsequent programming and some earpieces and other things we need will come in just about $170,000. And so that is the request. The existing equipment we do have will be rolled to our sort of our surplus, and will be used by our volunteers or special events when we have those, or we resume those in the near future, hopefully. And it'll give us ability when we bring in extra volunteer staff and others like the CERT team to have ability to communicate with us on portable radios. And we will continue to use those until we really just deplete the stock and need to make additional purchases. And that timeline, as I indicated in the staff report, for any additional purchase appears to be 3 to 4 years. With that, I open it for any questions or items of clarification.
Thank you, Chief Kalinowski. I will start with council comments. Councilmember Papineau, I'm sorry, jumping out of order here. Vice Mayor Sandu.
Yes, I don't have any question because these 30 radio police needed. They need to do their job, and I believe these radios are old, so I'm supporting this one. And the other one, my question, Mr. Chief Kalinowski, did you? We have a budget in these, right?
Yeah, so there is a residual balance in Measure R of $1.4 million, which closed. You're probably going to hear more about that in next month when they present those funds. However, Finance, who I think is on the line, has confirmed that with that residual use and anticipated expenditures, the Fund 47 Measure R can be modified and absorb the cost.
Thank you. Thank you. I will support that.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Councilmember Papineau.
I don't have much to say. I do know that these things are quite costly, so I'm glad to see using the contract with the county to leverage that and get the price down as much as possible. That's all.
Thank you, sir. Councilmember Vandenberg.
So I just wanted to double check with legal that you were talking about Measure R and in no way infringes on the intent of the law.
Well, let me jump in on that one. So we believe this is an appropriate use of Measure R. Galt Municipal Code Section 3.40.140. I believe the third or fourth sentence into that code section indicates where it defines police services. And under that definition of police services, it says purchasing police equipment.
I
And so
couldn't have said that better myself.
thank you. Thank you. Maybe I should go to law school.
Is that all? That's the only comments from you, Councilmember Vandenberg?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Lozano.
Yeah, thank you, Chief Kalinowski, for the report. I just have two questions. Are there different types of belt clips that are required? I didn't see that on the quote.
So our existing gear will accommodate the change.
Is that even for non-uniformed personnel like detectives and such?
Detectives generally, well, if there was a need, we could accommodate a specific need for some sort of radio holder on a one-off, as we do currently.
Okay.
So we're good, and they wear a cover vest in tactical operations, which accommodate the holding of the radio. So we're still good there.
Okay, and then one last question. I didn't notice in the quote either for additional batteries. I know sometimes one battery it's always nice to have a fully charged battery with you when you go out, right? And I didn't see any additional batteries. Is that included in any of this?
My existing budget can accommodate the additional purchase for batteries as needed, as that's already included in my current budget. So instead of buying batteries for the older portables, I can buy them for the newer portables.
Okay. Okay. I just want to make sure that we provide whatever we can as you deploy these new radios so that they're the most practical use for them. But I would support the purchase as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Lozano. My questions, Chief, would be, so just to make sure, that we're talking very clear on math, the purchase is 170,000 coming out of a 1.4 million current available. So, I mean, obviously simple math leaves us with 1.23 million. Is that, I just didn't see the kind of the itemized detailing of that. Would that be correct, Brian or Claire?
I'll kick to Claire.
Your math is good, and we'll know more as the year closes, but this is just to appropriate the budget to set it up for the purchase. There is ample funds in the fund balance.
Okay, but so the 1.4 is a projected, not an actual. Is that
No, that's an actual closing last June 30.
okay?
That's a pretty accurate number.
Okay. My next question would be kind of going off, piggybacking a little bit on what Rich asked, is the microphones, that comes up from the radio and clips. Are those going to be reused from the older, or are those all included brand new? Are they specific to the new radios? Are they interchangeable or what?
So there's two styles that the officers generally use if they're using an earpiece. A couple still don't use an earpiece. However, that extra residual dollars you see in there are for programming and the purchase of the earpieces based on user preference.
Okay.
So this accommodates those needs.
Okay. And what is is there in this purchase of the new radios? So to understand the cost you're asking us, or the expense you're asking for, is to purchase the radios, but you already have in your regular budget the ongoing purchase of batteries. So that's an already budgeted ongoing maintenance item. Correct? If I understood that, your answer to Mr. Lozano about that. Okay.
Yes, that is correct. That's in our existing budget.
Okay. So is there any kind of service plan or any kind of maintenance plan included with the purchase of these radios, outside of just a generic warranty or anything? Or does that come, we have anything like that with Delta Wireless? Or
Yes, I have a yearly agreement with Delta Wireless for our in-car radios and our portable radios for maintenance when there's issues or programming that needs to be done. These will switch out in large part our existing 2500 series radios, and these new radios will be put online under that maintenance program.
okay. So does that maintenance program, because I know I offer this similar to my customers in my business, does the current maintenance plan we have include just the servicing of it? Does it include a certain amount of parts and labor, or I'm just curious?
So if it's equipment failure and not user damage, the equipment failure portion or failure to operate items, I guess manufactured base is the best way to put it, those are going to be covered. If it's damage caused by an officer accidentally, it gets dropped and something breaks, we would be on the hook for those items. An antenna breaks, for example, or something like that. And we have, again, in my budget, funds to accommodate those one-offs when those happen.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying that.
Yes.
Tina, do we have any public comment on this item?
No written comment.
And Rose, do we have any hands raised online on this item?
We currently have no hands raised online.
Okay. Do we have any further comments by any council members? Okay. Well, I just like to say I also too support this purchase. Seems like a necessary item, critical item, more or less. And as long as our legal department has deemed it appropriate to do so with the funds, then as long as that is okay, which seems to be the case, then I would also support it. So I would look for anybody who would like to make an motion to approve.
So moved.
Moved by
Second.
Councilmember Lozano,
Second.
seconded by Vice Mayor Sandu. Tina, can you have a roll call vote, please?
Vice Mayor Sandu,
Yes.
Councilmember Papineau,
Aye.
Councilmember Vandenberg,
Aye.
Councilmember Lozano,
Aye.
Mayor Farmer.
Aye. Motion passes 5-0.
And on behalf of the membership, thank you for that vote.
Absolutely. Thank you for the presentation, Chief. Okay, moving on to our next item, item 5 of our regular calendar. Public Works Department. Subject is the solid waste legislation, franchise agreement, and rates overview. Presented by Public Works Director Mike Selling.
Thank you, Mayor Farmer. Again, Mike Selling, your Public Works Director, and I'll be giving you an overview of the state solid waste legislative mandates, the city's franchise agreement, and disposal rates, and then go over how it'll all relate to our upcoming efforts. Next slide, please. So first, these are the mandates. Starting with AB 341, which was passed in 2011, this bill increased the landfill diversion set by a prior mandate, AB 939, which was passed in 1989. And that prior mandate, AB 939, set a 50% threshold for diverting the waste from the landfills. AB 341 raised that level to 75%, and that target is to be achieved by next year, 2022. Additionally, to help achieve that level, AB 341 mandated recycling programs for businesses, public entities, and multifamily dwelling units. And by that, we mean condos, apartments, and the like. And basically, so for those businesses, agencies, and multifamily units that generate 4 cubic yards or more of total waste per week. Next mandate is AB 1826, and that was passed in 2014. This bill piggybacks on AB 341 in that it further requires recycling programs for organics and food waste for the same entities, starting in 2016 and at a threshold of 8 cubic yards per week generation. And then it ratchets down in subsequent years. In 2017, that threshold dropped to 4 cubic yards, as you can see. And then last year, the threshold dropped again to generators of 2 or more cubic yards of waste per week. The last and most impactful mandate is SB 1383. This bill was passed in 2016 and requires 50% of all organics to be diverted from landfills by last year, 2020. The mandate becomes enforceable 1 year from now in January 2022, which means fines for non-compliance. SB 1383 differs in this way from prior mandates, which only required a good faith effort. Additionally, SB 1383 further mandates the threshold raised to 75% of all organics be diverted by 2025. And I want to note that that's a statewide basis. It's not a jurisdiction by jurisdiction basis. Next slide, please. So I want to take a few minutes here to focus in on the organics, because that's really the crux of this latest mandate, and to hopefully explain why the state is mandating these changes. Organic waste includes green waste, which is your yard clippings and whatnot, wood waste, food waste, and also fibers such as paper and cardboard. From the pie chart here reflecting 2017 data, you can see that the organic waste totals about 2/3 of the entire waste stream. And just to drive that home, that means everything else, all the plastics, metals, glass, etc., that only adds up to about 1/3 of the total waste stream. So organics is the majority of it. And so organics, when they're landfilled, they break down and they decompose and create methane gas, which is not good for our air quality and has also been widely associated with climate change. Another key aspect that the state has focused on is food waste, which makes up nearly 1/4 of all the organic waste, and that's about 6 million tons annually. Consequently, as part of SB 1383, there's a requirement to recover 20% of disposable food waste, disposable edible food waste, I guess I want to clarify. That means coordinating with restaurants, grocery stores, food pantries, soup kitchens, and the like to distribute that edible food for consumption rather than have it being disposed. So hopefully this helps answer the question regarding why the state wants to reduce the amount of organics being landfilled. Next slide, please. So given these mandates with regards to organics, what are the city's responsibilities for compliance? First, and these are not in any particular order, is to provide organic collection services. All residents, including multifamily, are already compliant via the city's contract with Cal Waste. City staff are working with Cal Waste to get full compliance on the commercial side, which requires an ordinance update that I'll touch on in a later slide. And just to kind of let you know where we're at, we're currently about 75% compliance on the commercial recycling, but we're only about 14% compliant on the commercial organics recycling. Second, we'll be reaching out to the restaurants, grocery stores, and food pantries and others to coordinate an edible food recovery program. This may be something that's already in place between some of them, but we'll need to get a handle on what's out there and make sure that Galt is getting credit for what's being diverted. Third, we've already started our education and outreach, including this presentation tonight, and we'll be continuing these efforts throughout the year and beyond to help everyone understand the need to address organics recycling. Fourth is to seek to procure recycled organics products, which, as you will recall, the council just recently approved back on December 15th to set up a city policy for such. Fifth, as processing facilities come online and food recovery networks are established, we'll need to ensure that the city has secured its place and receives credit in the reporting to CalRecycle. And then lastly, we'll need to update the city's ordinance consistent with these requirements, and then monitor compliance and conduct enforcement if needed. Next slide, please. So now with that legislative backdrop, I'll turn to the city's franchise agreement. And bear with me here, I'm gonna kind of be bouncing back and forth a little bit just to hopefully tie things together, how they interrelate. You know, I don't know the exact date, but it's my understanding the city has contracted with Cal Waste for disposal services going back to perhaps the 1980s. That noted, prior to the current contract, the city entered a service contract with Cal Waste back in 2007. And then in 2013, that contract was extended from 2016 to 2019. And then subsequently in early 2018, the city extended the contract again to August of 2019. And that's when they hired a consultant to review Cal Waste's proposal for a new service contract that would effectively help the city to meet the various state legislative mandates. The city initially considered putting the service contract out to bid. However, after receiving a lot of supportive input from the community, the council elected to negotiate a new contract with Cal Waste. The new contract was subsequently approved in September of 2018. The new rates were later approved in January of 2019, and they took effect in March, 2 months later. The new contract made the city one of the first municipalities in the state to have a solid waste services program that would effectively comply with the new state mandates. Next slide, please. So turning now as to why the rates significantly increased, there's several reasons on that, and this is particularly for the commercial sector. As I noted in the start of this presentation, several state mandates were enacted over the past several years. However, these mandates started much further back. I mentioned AB 939, which was the first solid waste mandate effectively, and that was way back in 1989. It at the time required cities and counties to divert 50% of their solid waste by the year 2000. While profitable markets were created or expanded for some things like glass, aluminum cans, some metals and plastics, much of the diversion came at additional cost to process, repurpose, and recycle those materials. With the additional mandates I noted previously, suffice it to say that all of these mandates effectively increased disposal costs associated with the need to sort, transport, and reprocess, not to mention the associated administration, outreach, and reporting efforts and those related costs. In addition, as you may have noticed, most of the mandates are heavily focused on the commercial side, so it's particularly impacting the commercial rates. So changes in the recycling marketplace. For several years, China was the destination for much of the world's recycled materials. However, that changed dramatically in 2017, and I'll get to this more in the next slide. Logistically, though, in order to help reduce the associated additional costs of the mandates and recycling market changes, service providers needed to make changes in their collection, separation, and processing operations, the additional costs of which are passed on to the service recipients. And then lastly, as I noted here, it's my understanding that Cal Waste had not requested a rate increase since 2013. Next slide, please. So the recycling market changes. To expand on the change in China's policy on receiving recycled materials, they adopted a new policy referred to as the China Sword, or what they call the National Sword. This change in policy became effective in January of 2018, and it dramatically tightened their standards relative to recycled material contamination levels. Through this policy change, China, with essentially no real notice to the international community, effectively made 97% of the material that they had been receiving no longer acceptable. This overwhelmingly impacted the markets for these materials and forced the need to either find other potential places to dispose of them or additional processing to meet the greatly reduced contamination levels. The other major impact to the recycling markets is the state mandates themselves, as I've touched on. They have effectively created the need for new collection and processing mechanics. Once collected and sorted, these organic materials need to be transported to special processing facilities, none of which are near Galt, unfortunately. However, as more such special organics processing facilities come online and markets adjust, it is hoped that associated costs will stabilize over time. Next slide, please. So now circling back to the city's franchise agreement, I want to try to tie this all together. With the current Cal Waste contract, the city, as I noted, purchased a program that is compliant with the state's mandates and puts the bulk of the responsibilities on Cal Waste. It's important to note, though, that with those responsibilities come significant costs for the carts and trucks and sorting equipment, as well as the additional hauling costs and fees at the special organics processing facilities. Besides meeting the mandates, the contract also provides for some additional beneficial services, which include an annual bulky waste pickup for very large items like furniture and major appliances, as well as a handy hauler bin. And I can tell you in my travels around the city, people are taking advantage of it, so that's good to see. When the current contract was being negotiated, it was recognized that there was some disparity between the residential and commercial sides, which was corrected. City staff worked with Cal Waste staff to right-size several commercial accounts and provide helpful tips, such as breaking down all boxes and taking advantage of the included recycling cart to reduce their service level and try to save some money. And then lastly, though we're nearly 2 years into this contract, the city is continuing to look for opportunities and dialogue with Cal Waste regarding potential rate relief options for the businesses. Next slide, please. So in concluding this presentation, I wanted to go over what's coming up. The key immediate effort for the city is to update its solid waste ordinance to reflect these recent mandates, and particularly SB 1383, relative to the organics aspects. Our ordinance is, it's the last time it was updated, I forget the year now, but it's been quite some time. So we anticipate bringing the updated ordinance to council next month, as the city manager noted in his presentation earlier. With the enforcement deadline looming next January, we'll continue to partner with Cal Waste in conducting outreach on the need for applicable businesses to secure organics containers and recycling services. We certainly don't want to be on Cal Recycle's non-compliant list, so we can avoid any fines or other potential enforcement actions. And I didn't note it on this slide, but as I mentioned previously regarding edible food recovery, the city will also be engaging key businesses and any nonprofits to establish or participate in a recoverable food program and ensure ongoing access. And then we'll be continuing to work with Cal Waste on monitoring and reporting the relative data, including organics and recycling. And then lastly, with these additional staff efforts, we may need to consider any potential budget impacts. And then, Mayor Farmer and fellow council members, this concludes staff's presentation. Mr. Wilson, whom I failed to introduce at the start of this, I think Jeremy Wilson is on, maybe in the meeting now. He is our analyst here at Public Works, and he and I have been doing a lot of the work on this and will continue to do so. So anyway, with that, Mr. Wilson and myself will be available to answer any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Selling, for the presentation. A couple just real quick questions, and I'll go around to the council members. Does this, I noticed on some of the past legislation, and you even mentioned it about the good faith, where they kind of dictate deadlines, but then there's a lot of language that says, well, it's a deadline, but yet if you're making good effort towards achieving that, then it's not exactly a deadline. So there's like this gray area. I mean, is that kind of the same thing with this with the dates you mentioned?
Well, it's been interesting because, like I noted with AB 939, each jurisdiction had essentially a target that they had to hit. And that's the way that was set up. Whereas this is not, it's a statewide target. So yeah, it's a little more ambiguous, but it also, could potentially work in CalRecycle's favor, because if they just simply deem that we're not doing enough, even though we don't have a specific target to hit, they can still, impose fines to say, you're not doing enough, you need to do more, kind of thing. So I think it could work against us, if, or for any agencies that are not compliant, so.
Okay, thank you. I have another question, but I'll circle back after my fellow council members. We'll start with Vice Mayor Sandu. Do you have any comments on this item?
First of all, thank you, Mr. Selling, give us the presentation. And this presentation is mostly self-explanatory, but I have a few questions now. One thing you said, next step is update city solid waste ordinance. What that mean? What will be? What is can be a new ordinance?
Yeah, so excellent question, Vice Mayor. So essentially the city solid waste ordinance, as you can imagine, it was years before SB 1383 was passed. And so it didn't really touch on any organics related recycling. And so we need to put some language in there to address these mandates that we will essentially, be responsible for establishing a recoverable food program, that we will work with our service provider to make sure everybody gets the containers that they need to show that, that they are compliant as to getting the services. Again, it's not about hitting a number per se. So many tons of organics were diverted, or so much food waste or whatnot. I mean, yeah, there's a 20% or a 50% threshold, but those are statewide targets. And so, but we need to have language in that ordinance to reflect these changes. There are other things in the legislation, some of which are not applicable. Certain agencies may be applicable. Like one example I'll give you real quick is there's an exemption for small or rural locations, and it's really small, and I forget the number, but it's like less than 5,000 people or something. So, I mean, Galt we're not that small, obviously, so we aren't applicable for that, but there's other things for high altitude locations that they can get an exemption. But there are a couple of potential exemptions that may apply to some of our businesses. And one of those is if you don't have the space to actually put, these containers. And I know even talking with Mayor Farmer, gosh, some time ago, maybe a year and a half ago or something, and how he and some of the other businesses, in close proximity, kind of work together to address some of these, space concerns, or just to, find, alternative ways of meeting the mandates as far as getting the service, but working within their limitations. So there's an exemption for space that might apply to some of the businesses. There's another one that's I'm failing to recall. Jeremy, I don't know if you recall it, but there's another exemption too that may apply to some of our businesses. So little things like
half yard of organic waste or less, and you qualify for an exemption.
Yeah, a de minimis exemption. So if you're really small, say maybe some small professional office or something, that doesn't generate very much paper or whatnot, they may be able to qualify for a de minimis exemption. So, and again, these are really organics related businesses. So it's only we estimate that it's probably only going to apply to, I want to say, of the, 208 or so businesses, Jeremy, I think we're looking at around 94, so not quite half. Does that sound about right? That's the numbers that stick in my mind.
Currently, we have 94 businesses that meet the 2-yard threshold that are not subscribed to organics recycling.
Okay. So those are the ones that we'll be outreaching to. But to get back to your question, Vice Mayor, is that we need to put some specific language in the ordinance to address these types of things.
Okay, and then my next question is, you mentioned something rate increase going to increase. So this rate going to increase, you have an idea what kind of percentage they're going to increase? Or?
Yeah, so the contract that we have with Cal Waste that was approved in 2018, it had 3 rate increases in it, and I think it's tied to the CPI. Jeremy may have more specifics, but I think it's going to be around 3% this time. So this is the 3rd and last built-in rate increase that was in the contract, if I'm not mistaken.
That's correct.
So,
Okay.
so the contract back in, I think 2018, and we don't have any cost. I talking about that contract in 2018, right?
Can you say that again, Vice Mayor? I'm sorry.
I'm talking about we get the contract back in, I believe, in 2018, right?
Mm-hmm.
At the
Correct.
end of 2018. Okay. My next question is: you said you're gonna enforce, or we're gonna be like as a teacher. How you gonna approach? Or you already start approaching to the business, which are can be on that topic, or we not approaching to the business yet?
Yeah, another good question that I probably should have expanded on a little more. So the important dates for SB 1383 are, so next January, as I noted, enforcement, it becomes enforceable. And at that point is the state will be doing the enforcement. And they have the enforcement responsibility for 2 years. So essentially, they will be determining whether or not the city of Galt is compliant in all aspects of 1383. And if we're not, they could fine us, or they could do other enforcement actions, things like maybe, restrict us from being eligible for some type of grant funding. So things like that. So, but they will be the ones that will be enforceable, and they're going to be asking us, okay, hey, Galt, why don't you have all of your eligible businesses getting the recycling services? So that's what, and then, like I said, depending on what the justification or reasoning might be, they may say, okay, we'll allow that, or give us some additional time to become compliant. It's going to be up to them really at that point. But in 2024, that enforcement will shift down to the local agencies. So essentially every city and county will then be responsible and have, the enforcement authority to fine businesses if need be for non-compliance. So there is a shift in enforcement that happens, well, not quite 3 years from now. So.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor. Councilmember Papineau.
Thanks, Mike. That was a very thorough presentation. I appreciate the background. Give me a lot better understanding. And a couple questions. The edible food recovery, can you kind of expand a little bit on that? Are we talking about, like, you got grocery stores that are throwing out things that are at or near expiration, or what kind of volume are we looking at?
Yeah, exactly. That's a good question. We don't have a good sense of that, and that's why that will be one of our concerted efforts here in the coming months, is to reach out. What may be the case, and I can only speak to, I have a connection to a soup kitchen in Lodi. I know the lady who runs it, and I know the system that she's had set up for years, and how she's got connections with various grocery stores and whatnot, where, if they have something that gets within, and they have certain time windows, if it's within, say, a few days or a week, depending on what type of product it is, of expiring, then they let her know, and she goes and picks it up and either distributes it, to homeless or whoever else, or utilizes it in her soup kitchen to feed the folks that come. So there may be already some things like that are set up with nonprofits around the city, or it may be like, a Rayleigh's or Walmart or whoever already has a system set up where those potentially, near expiration food items are going. And we just need to know what that information is. What is the volume, like you asked, and so that we can get credit for it.
Okay, I appreciate that. When I was on the school board, I recall that Congress passed it wasn't a requirement, but it gave the ability for school districts to donate to local food closets or whatever their surplus, because prior to that, apparently all that was mandated to be thrown away. So
yeah,
I was kind of wondering what was what was out there as far as what's actually considered edible.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it can range the full gamut. It can be canned goods. It can be, you know, fruits and vegetables, even baked goods. It can vary quite a bit. I have not seen much in the way of like proteins or whatnot, unless it's some kind of pre-processed, you know, meat. You know, some kind of sausage maybe or something like that that's been processed. I don't know that there's anything for raw meat. I think that that's way too heavily regulated, but that'll be part of our effort, is to understand it and to Cal Recycle's credit, you know, I mean, they obviously know that every jurisdiction in the state, you know, is working through this, and I think we're ahead of most of them. But they've got a lot of good resources online too, and I think, you know, even some of the churches or whatnot that may have some programs that we can, you know, recognize and take credit for, you know, to show compliance to Cal Recycle.
All right. And then just real quick, I was going to ask, the Vice Mayor asked about the enforcement, and that was pretty clear. So for the up until 2024, there will be no mechanism for enforcement or fines on the businesses directly. Is that correct?
Not directly on the businesses, no. Cal Recycle will be fining cities or counties if they deem them non-compliant, so.
Okay.
Potentially.
Thank you. Thank you. That's all.
Thank you, Councilmember Papineau. Moving on to Councilmember Vandenberg.
Thank you for the presentation. The gentleman before me asked all the questions I was going to ask, so I don't have any.
Thank you, sir.
That's okay too. Or if you think of something, you know how to get a hold of me.
Councilmember Lozano.
Yeah, like I said, most everybody's asked all the questions I was curious about. I want to expand a little bit on the haulback or backhaul type concept of grocery stores. I understand we want to capture the data of either tonnage or however it works, the metric in which they measure that. But there is no requirement that our service provider haul it to get credit for it, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Okay.
No, Cal Recycle will simply want to see that it did not get landfilled, basically.
Okay. So they could provide, in theory, and I don't know operationally how it would happen, but they could certainly provide us with packing slips, if you will, that they provide to their backhaul company to, if we had a copy of that, we could prove that that was taken to an organic landfill or organic processing.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. If they had some kind of chain of custody type documentation is what we'd be, you know, looking for. Yes.
Okay. And just to touch on what Councilmember Papineau mentioned about schools, I know that our service provider, Cal Waste, has done a lot of work in schools, specifically with the elementary school district over the last several years, related to organics recycling and really kind of getting the kids involved in that process. Are we going to get credit for what they do?
Well, essentially, if it's within the city of Galt, yeah, we are going to try to, you know, essentially demonstrate to Cal Recycle that, you know, our service provider has been doing this outreach, you know, for years, and it's all part of our effort to be compliant. So we will definitely, you know, try to utilize that to make our case for sure.
I know that their education portion of their company has really been out pounding the pavement, and obviously not recently in school since kids are at home, but certainly in the last several years. And so it would be nice to, I know we're going to work with them already, but that might be a piece of data that we may want to collect. And then lastly, it's kind of more a facetious question, but you know, and I always bring this up whenever this happens because it still frustrates me, but you know, the state, these are all state mandates, right? So, you know, we have all these laws that are going into effect that are going to affect our businesses once again. But have they provided any funding source for businesses or for the community or the city even?
No, nothing in terms of funding. What Cal Recycle, will say is we've got the tools and, hopefully I don't get too personal on this, but essentially the state's typical response on these types of things is the cities and the counties have the ability to, impose taxes or fees. And so, that's kind of the way that they look at it anyway.
I get it,
But yeah.
Mike. I get it, Mike. You're the messenger here, but you've heard me say this a million times. It just frustrates me to no end that especially in a community like ours, where we do have some national and international chain businesses, but for the most part, our economy is run off of people that have put their blood, sweat, and tears into the community and into the businesses, and yet here we are again being faced with rate increases and things because someone thinks it's a good idea to recover organics. And I'm sure there's some science behind it, but anyhow, I don't want to go down that rabbit hole. But I think it's important that the community understand, and our business community understands that it's not always good things aren't always coming out of the state legislature. I'll just put it that. And I have a very good friend who works there, but I tell him all the time the same thing. So anyhow, thank you for the presentation. I really want to hear, I don't know if they're on the line, but I'd really like to hear some feedback from the chamber on their thoughts. But like I said, I don't know if they're on the line tonight. But thank you for the presentation.
Thank you, Councilmember, and thank you, Mike. Just a few things from me. So the enforcement when it comes to play, I'm assuming that the city, it's a little bit far down the road, but does the city anticipate any cost with enforcement? I mean, we're going to have to create, like a staff position or something to do so. I mean, do we have any idea of that yet at this point?
I think you're thinking along the same lines as I'm thinking, Mayor Farmer, is, when we would take over enforcement here in just under 3 years, they're depending, hopefully we can basically get to full compliance, and then it's, just kind of monitor and report the data. And like I said, it is a statewide target. So, I mean, for, an agency that's as small as Galt, certainly we're hoping that, the giants around the state are going to, carry more than their fair share, so to speak, to achieve these compliance targets. So it's really gonna, and the thing that worries me is because it is, relatively subjective. It's not just hitting a number like it used to be in the past. That was, obviously, you knew whether you were there or not. But now it's subjective as to whether or not Cal Recycle deems us, doing enough to be compliant. So, but to get back to your question about, when enforcement turns to the city and we have to, potentially take enforcement action on specific businesses that are non-compliant, there may be some, that's why I mentioned in there about budgetary impacts if we had to fund a partial position or something like that. I think it's too early to tell, but I think that those are the kind of same thoughts that I was having. So.
Okay. And someone mentioned the handy haulers earlier. Do we know, is Cal Waste doing handy haulers again? Because I know they suspended that service because of COVID for a while. I wasn't happy about that because it's a free service that citizens were entitled to. Is that back open again?
Yes, I believe they had suspended it until it was back in like April and May, as I recall. And I think I know they're doing it again because I've seen them out there all over the place for the past probably at least 3-4 months or more, maybe longer. So I think that they started doing that again sometime over the summer.
I'm just curious if it's people paying for them or it's the free, because people are still getting them, but the entitled
right.
To yeah.
We can inquire with them.
Yeah, please. Please do.
If I could jump in here real quick, I think what they suspended was the bulky waste pickup, where the employee
yes,
grab stuff and put it in the back of the truck.
You are correct.
there's a million of them around my neighborhood, and I think people are getting them for free because they're at just different houses all over. So I think it was bulky waste that they suspended, and I'm not even sure that that's back up and running.
And I'll check with them.
It was. If you could please check on that, Mike, I would appreciate it. The last thing here, and again, just some thoughts too. It's like, listening to all this, it's like the state's favorite word is compliant. It's like every time we turn around, we have to be compliant with something. Super frustrating. I know that a lot of our businesses are frustrated with, all that took place with our garbage. So my last question is, these organics containers is this something that they're going to be, because I know in the past it's like we encourage you to recycle more, we need you to recycle X amount of more, but instead of giving you that bin for free to encourage that, they want to charge you for the bin to do that. So it doesn't seem like there's very much incentive. Are these organics containers, is there going to be a fee attached to that to the businesses?
Yes, there is. So what we will hopefully be doing is to try to, how much of what they're currently putting in their garbage bin is organic that could go in that organic bin, and then potentially reduce their regular garbage service. Kind of like what was done before with the recycling. If you take your recyclables out of the garbage bin, now you don't need as big a garbage bin. And so, we would be working with these businesses to see what that potential is. That they could shift it essentially. There will be, likely in most cases, I would expect there will be some additional cost. How much, that's a good question. I don't have a good answer for you on that right now. I mean, we could look at some potential scenarios on some of the accounts to see what it might be. It would be an educated guess, but I can tell you, like early on when we were dealing with some of the big ones back in, whatever it was, spring and summer of 19, like the Taco Bells and McDonald's and stuff. I mean, they had a huge amount of organic waste and still do, but they were waiting for their corporate to kind of put a policy in place that they would go by. So even though they knew they could, change their service to reduce their costs, they were basically kind of somewhat held hostage, I guess you could say, by their corporate policies. So, but for the smaller businesses, yeah, I think that's the reality is that there will be some additional costs, and we'll be working with them to try to minimize what that is. If they can again downsize their regular garbage receptacle, in order to shift that organic material over. So,
well, we would hope. It's funny that we're talking about recycling organics, things that are basically part of nature. I was earlier when you were doing a presentation, I Googled the definition of organic, and it talks about, carbon-based things that are, important to the environment, important, deliver important nutrients and to the soil and all this stuff. And yet we're being asked to divert them. It's just, it's comical kind of, but anyways, thank you for the presentation. I don't have anything more to add. Do we have any public comment on this item, Tina?
No written comment.
And Rose, do we have any online comments?
We have no online comments.
Okay.
No hands raised.
I have one more question.
Yes, Councilmember, go ahead.
Is it possible to have a voluntary program with citizens? This is a citywide goal, and it's mandated by the state, but it's a citywide goal, or is it specific to businesses only?
Yeah, no, good question, council member. I mean, you could still have a citywide goal, but as far as the details of SB 1383, it's requiring all commercial businesses that generate 2 cubic yards of organic waste or total waste per week, to have these organics recycling service. So it is business specific.
So these businesses would have to be picked up independent of other small businesses and citizens and metered.
When you say metered, can you explain that?
Calculated volume, weighed, written down, fed back, information fed back to the city for verification and justification that we did such things.
So it wouldn't be business by business. This is where, Cal Waste has the responsibility on determining those quantities, those volumes, the tonnages, and reporting it. And then we're simply, as the jurisdiction responsible to Cal Recycle, ensuring that, that they're doing everything they need to do to be compliant. So.
This is why I'm asking if there was a voluntary program for other businesses and or citizens, and it's a citywide volume, goal. Everybody could help out. It's probably where things will trend anyway.
Yeah, so you could definitely do that. But again, per SB 1383, the requirement is that all commercial businesses that generate that generate more than 2 cubic yards per week of waste have the organics recycling service. Okay. So you can't get away from that, unfortunately, for them. I mean, you could be, having a great community response and recovering 80% of the organics. But if we still had some businesses that didn't have the service that hit that threshold of waste generation, they could potentially say we're non-compliant. And again, that's kind of where this subjectivity comes in. It's a nice thought, I guess, and who knows? I mean, I would love to be wrong on this. I can only tell you that the Cal Recycle folks, they're not so touchy-feely, I guess I'll say it that way. So.
Does that conclude your comments, Jay?
Yes, thank you.
All right, thank you, Councilmember Vandenberg. Does anybody, any other council members have any last comments to add? All right, well, thank you, Mike, for the presentation. Very thorough as usual. And although frustrating, you made it very clear, so we know what we're up against. And yeah, so we'll have to roll with it, I guess.
Mayor Farmer, could I just, I want to express my appreciation to Jeremy. He was an integral part in preparing the staff report and helping with the presentation. So we've got a great analyst here, and he's been a great help.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Thank you.
All right, if no other questions, we will move on to our next item. Item I in our regular calendar, communication. Ms. Hubert?
Not this evening.
Thank you. Moving on to our next item J, City Clerk's report. Item 1, subject, Planning Commission appointment. Ms. Hubert?
Okay, so this item, it will not need a motion as it's Councilmember Vandenberg's individual appointment. The recommendation is Councilmember Vandenberg appointment of Daniel Denier to the Planning Commission to fill a vacant position with a term ending December 2024. The Galt Municipal Code 2.70.050 establishes the process by which a person is appointed to the Planning Commission. Each council member shall appoint one person whose term shall run concurrently with that of the council member so appointing, and the appointee must meet the qualifications in Galt Municipal Code 2.70.040, and Mr. Denier's application, he meets these qualifications. Council member Vandenberg, did you have any comments?
No, just glad to see a good person on committee.
Okay, that concludes this item.
Thank you. Do I need to ask for public comment on this?
Yes.
Okay. Do we have any public comment on this item?
No written comments.
And Rose, do we have any hands raised online?
We have no hands currently raised online.
Thank you. Well, if we have no, do we have any council members that have a comment on this? Okay, thank you much. Moving on to our next item, regular calendar, item K, comments by staff, and I'll turn it over to our city manager, Mr. Hines.
Thank you. Thank you. A couple of things that I wanted to mention to the good folks of Galt. Back on December 15th, council directed me to develop and send 2 letters, one to Governor Newsom and one to the Sacramento County Board of Supervisors on behalf of our business community, particularly our small business community. I wanted to let the council know and the public know that those letters have been sent off to both of those parties. With the letter for Governor Newsom, we wanted to wait till the governor's budget was released because personally, I suspected there would be something in there for small businesses. And as it turns out, he's got an accelerating economic recovery and job creation earmark in his current budget. It's about 1.1 billion, that's with a B, and it's for immediate relief for small businesses. So we wanted to write on the tails of the release of that budget. As far as the county is concerned, we became aware that they may have excess CARES Act money that they're still holding. And so the letter was sent with the intent of basically asking if they would consider allocating some of those dollars to Galt as part of their overall plan to allocate those funds. So it's my hope that these letters will reach their destinations and hopefully bear fruit for our small businesses. But I wanted to get that message out there and also let the business community know that we are thinking about them and we're trying to get relief, and to let them know that your city council is working hard to make that happen. The second thing I wanted to mention, and this is my last item, on the city's website, there are a number of COVID updates that sit on the right side. And so there's information on vaccines, caseloads, and I mention this particularly so folks can take advantage of the links that we provide to Sac County for vaccine availability. Now, we know that there is a certain amount of complications in doling out the vaccines, or either there's a coordination issue or there's a supply issue. But at some point down the line, both of those will be taken care of. And by monitoring the county's website, our folks will be most able to take advantage of that vaccine availability when it becomes available. So I'm asking everyone, just keep an eye on our website or take the links from our press releases, lock them into your favorites, and go and check those county websites and dashboards to make sure you're always up to speed on the availability of the vaccines. And also these dashboards will keep you up to speed on how the pandemic is affecting our communities as well. And with that, I'm gonna turn it over to the rest of the staff. And let's start with our Human Resources Director, Stephanie Van Stein.
I have no update this evening. Thank you.
Very good. Since our Finance Director, Claire Tyson, popped on, let's go to her.
Thank you. I have nothing further to report. Thank you.
Our Community Development Director, by the way, Permanent Community Development Director, Craig Hoffman. Craig he's not going away now. So Craig, any comments?
Yeah, other than, I hope the council liked the format of the study session. I think it helps staff get a little bit more direction, and hopefully it makes the process smoother as well. So thank you for tonight.
Very good. Thank you, Craig. Our Economic Development Manager, Amy Mendez.
Good evening. Just wanted briefly to follow up on Lorenzo's comments regarding the vaccinations. So there is a public forum with Dr. Kassiri and the Public Health Immunization Program Manager, Rachel Allen. That'll be on Thursday, the 21st at 6 p.m. So that's a Zoom meeting that they hold every other Thursday. This one will be this Thursday on the 21st at 6 o'clock. And it's a great opportunity for citizens to ask questions and get feedback in regards to the distribution of vaccines. So we'll be posting that tomorrow on our Facebook and Instagram pages, but just wanted to give folks a heads up. We have been receiving a lot of phone calls, and I know that the clerk's office has been having to direct folks to the county for further information, but this would be a good opportunity to have any questions answered about the vaccines. And that's it. That's all I have for this evening.
And I would echo those thoughts. I attended a community session a couple of Wednesdays ago with the doctor, and it was very well done. She was very open to questions. I learned a lot about vaccines and testing, things that I did not know. So if you have the opportunity, please spend some time and attend that session. Thank you, Amy.
Yeah.
Interim Police Chief Brian Kalinowski.
Thank you, Mr. Hines. We opened the meeting discussing the tragic loss of Deputy Gibson and K-9 Riley. And thank you for Councilmember Lozano for taking the time to do that for us. And then, of course, it was touched on by the mayor. We had a good turnout in spite of COVID for folks attending Kevin Ton's memorial. And we had hoped to have a video of that, but we had a last minute cancellation. So we did at least manage to get some photos up memorializing our events. And it went well for our staff. And so that was good for the Ton family and good for our staff. And so I was appreciative to see that. And again, thank you for your vote today supporting the staff for the equipment needs. And with that, I have nothing further. Thank you.
All righty. Thank you, Chief. Public Works Director Mike Selling.
No, I don't have anything further. I think I talked enough, but I appreciate the questions from the council, and we'll be following up. Thank you.
All righty. Very good. And our city attorney, Harriet Steiner.
Hi. The only thing I would add is that mostly I think what Kimberly and I have been working on the last week is to help the police department and city manager's office to deal with the sexual violent predator issues that are coming up this week.
Okay. Very good. Very good. Tina Hubert, anything from the clerk?
Nothing further. Thank you.
Okay. Rose Rodacker, anything?
I have nothing tonight, thank you.
Okay. Mr. Mayor, that concludes staff comments.
All right. Thank you, sir. We'll move on to comments by city council members, future agenda items. We'll start with our vice mayor, Mr. Sandhu. Mr. Vice Mayor, I think your mic is muted still.
All right, first of all, I would like to thank you all the staff doing a good job and bringing us a full report in a detail. And I also like to congratulate permanent Community Development Director, Craig Hoffman. And I also attended Kevin Ton's memorial. It's good for the community, good for their family, and we, remembering their, I think, 8th year with that. But that's it tonight. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, sir. Councilmember Papineau.
I just want to thank each of the directors for very thorough reports, and Director Hoffman for the opportunity to discuss that. I think we made a lot of progress there, and looking forward to Friday and being able to get in a little bit deeper on this SVP problem. That's all.
Thank you, Councilmember. Mr. Vandenberg.
Congratulations, Craig, and well-deserved, I'm sure. Thank you, staff, for all the reports. It's quite informative, and I really appreciate the overview of the year to come, and then some. It gives me a chance to think about things and study and learn, be more informed as we make those decisions. And finally, I'd like to say, my heart really goes out to the family and the officers and the fellow co-workers of the fallen officer coming directly after the memorial. It really brings it home. So just want to say I'm thinking about you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vandenberg. Councilmember Lozano.
Yeah, I will be brief here. I just thought that, well, kind of want to get feedback from my colleagues on this. I thought it'd be a good idea to send out maybe a letter of congratulations to the newly elected members of boards and commissions and committees, maybe not elected committees or commissions, but what I'm getting at is maybe like the elementary school districts in the area, the newly elected or re-elected members, the Cosumnes Community Service District, sending out just a letter of congratulations and well wishes in their new endeavor or continued endeavor. I think it would say a lot coming from the city council. And then on top of that, doing something for our volunteer of the year as presented by the Herald, and as well as the person of the year, and doing something from the council to them. I just think it'd be a good gesture, and I think they would appreciate our recognition as a body of their accomplishments. And so I just throw that out there as an idea. I don't think it's too late to do it. They're still getting their feet on the ground, and I think it'd be a good idea to do that.
Councilmember Lozano, are you referring to positions like elected positions that? Okay.
Yeah, like the elementary school districts, the high school district folks, the community service district. I can't think of anything. Oh, maybe the Herald Fire District, and then certainly the two, the volunteer and person of the year separately. But yeah.
Okay. I would be fine with that. The rest of the council, does anybody have any opposition to something like that?
I received a similar letter and I think it's a great idea.
Okay. Mr. Hines, if you could take that as some official consensus to bring that back for, I don't know, I guess we don't bring it back as an item of just something that, I don't know what you want to call it.
I'll talk to Ms. Hubert about that particular item, and we'll get that back in front of council. Harriet, does that require a formal vote, or can we just do that as a courtesy?
I think you can just do that as a courtesy.
Okay. All right. So we'll make that happen. We have city letterhead and thank you notes, and we'll be sure to do that. Okay.
Thank you, and that's all I have for tonight.
Thank you. I got everybody right. I think I started with Paul and okay. All right. So last myself. So yeah, I just want to thank all the staff for good presentations tonight from Mike and Craig, and from Chief Kalinowski, all very thorough and very informative. And I thank Craig for his permanent position. And speaking of position, I just want to kind of give a little shout out to, you know, how really happy I am about our new PIO position. Just having that position, I think I've seen a huge impact. I'm seeing a lot of information being shared readily on the city's Facebook page and the city's Instagram page, and the creation of the Instagram page by our city manager. And I think it was such an important position that we lacked for so long. And I know that that was something that Mr. Haglund kind of was an instrumental in forming before he left. But I just think it's so important, especially in a time like now with, you know, information being needed badly out there. And so I commend, you know, Amy, for the job you're doing. Thank you for that. And I just wanted to say that. Secondly, want to thank the citizens for all their help in opposing the this SVP issue that we're dealing with right now, and the formation of the petition, and the people that are instrumental in that, and everybody that's been writing letters, and all the people that have been emailing all of us council members, including myself, lots of emails, and lots of people that are very concerned. And you're not, and just to let you know, you're not bugging us, because we feel, you know, your concern, and we thank you for reaching out to us on behalf of your community. So I just want to say thank you for everybody doing that. And then lastly, I just want to close out with just again expressing, you know, myself and on behalf of, you know, the city, our condolences to Officer Gibson's family. He was a resident of Herald, so he is, you know, I consider him, you know, part of our community. And actually didn't know him personally, but I did realize that he was a customer of ours at our place of business, and along with his wife from time to time. So very sad. And I live with some friends of his in our department, and so I know that's got to have a real impact, especially after coming off of the memorial celebration for Officer Ton. So again, our county owes his family a debt that can never be repaid. So we thank him for his service, and I ask everybody in Galt to include his family in their prayers. So with that, I just want to remind everybody to be safe out there, and thank you for watching our council meeting. So if there's no other comments, I'd like to adjourn our meeting tonight. Thank you all. Good night.
Good.